I was sent to the moon to recover a lost artifact. What we found proved the Bible was right. Before I start, I need you to do something for me. Right now, wherever you are, your bedroom, your car, walking down the street with headphones in, I need you to comment and tell me where you're listening from. I know it sounds strange, but just do it. Write it down. Because if this recording disappears tomorrow, if this channel gets scrubbed from the internet, if I vanish without a trace, at least I'll know that somebody, somewhere, heard what I'm about to tell you. At least there'll be a record that I tried to warn you. My name is Jake Millerson, and what I'm about to share with you will change everything you thought you knew about history, about religion, about why we're really here. But I'm running out of time, and they're getting closer. I'm recording this in my apartment right now. It's 2:47 a.m. and I haven't slept in 3 days. There's a black SUV parked across the street that's been there since Tuesday. Different drivers, but the same vehicle. Same tinted windows. They don't even try to hide anymore. My phone clicks when I make calls. Conversations echo back at me with a half-second delay. 2 days ago, I found a GPS tracker under my car, military grade, the kind that costs 15 grand and requires federal clearance to purchase. I left it there. Let them think I don't know. Yesterday, my internet cut out for exactly 4 minutes while I was uploading files to a secure server. 4 minutes. Not 3, not 5. Precise, professional. The kind of precision that tells you someone's watching every single thing you do, and they want you to know it. Here's what you need to understand. I was a Marine, 8 years, 2 tours in Afghanistan, decorated, honorable discharge. I've seen things that would make your stomach turn, done things I'm not proud of in the name of God and country. After I came home, I worked private security, kept my head down, tried to forget the smell of burning flesh and the sound of children crying in languages I couldn't understand. I stopped believing in God somewhere between Kandahar and coming home. How could there be a God when I'd seen what human beings were capable of? That's what I told myself for years. I was wrong. God is real. And that's the most terrifying thing I've ever had to accept. Because if God is real, then so is everything else. The judgment, the reckoning, all of it. In 2019, I was recruited for a mission that officially doesn't exist. They told me it was a recovery operation, that I'd be going somewhere remote, that the pay would set me up for life. $2 million for 3 months of work. I should have known better. Nothing good ever comes from that much money and that many non-disclosure agreements. They sent me to the moon. Not the moon you think you know. Not the one they show you in history books with Neil Armstrong and flags and footprints. The real moon. The one where Apollo 18 actually landed before they scrubbed it from history. And what we found there, in a crater on the far side where nobody's supposed to look, proved that every single word of the Bible was true. Not metaphorically true, not spiritually true. Literally, factually, historically true. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I know. I would have laughed in my own face if someone had told me this story 6 years ago. But I held the proof in my hands. I saw the recordings. I walked through a structure that shouldn't exist, built by beings that witnessed the beginning of everything. And I touched an artifact that had the 10 Commandments written on it in perfect ancient Hebrew. Except it was created thousands of years before human civilization even existed. The government has it now, locked away somewhere deep underground, probably at Site R or Wright-Patterson or some black site that doesn't even have a name. They'll never let you see it, but I saw it, and 2 other men saw it with me. One disappeared, one's officially dead. I'm the only one left who can tell you what really happened up there. I'm telling you this now because I don't have much time left. The pattern is clear. First they isolate you, cut you off from anyone who might believe you or help you. Then they discredit you, make you look crazy, paranoid, unstable. Then you have an accident, a car crash, a suicide, a heart attack at 34 years old. I'm not going quietly. I've made copies, lots of them, hidden in places they'll never find. If something happens to me, this story will still get out. But I wanted to tell it myself, in my own words, while I still can. I wanted you to hear it from someone who was there, who saw it with his own eyes, who came back changed in ways I still don't fully understand. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you everything. The recruitment, the training, the launch that never appeared on any official manifest, the landing coordinates they gave us, the wreckage we found, the structure buried in Lunar regolith that had been waiting there for thousands of years. I'm going to tell you about the chamber, about the recordings left behind by beings who watched God create the universe and decided to document it. I'm going to tell you about the moment I fell to my knees in a place where there's no air to breathe and wept inside my helmet because I finally understood. We're not alone. We never were. And everything, every plague, every miracle, every word written by terrified prophets who saw things they couldn't explain, all of it happened exactly the way they said it did. They're going to call me crazy. They might say I had a psychotic break, that the stress of combat finally caught up with me, that I'm making this up for attention or money. Let them say whatever they want. You'll know the truth when I disappear. You'll know the truth when this video gets taken down and re-uploaded 100 times by people who recognize something real when they hear it. And maybe, just maybe, when enough people know, they won't be able to keep the lid on this anymore. That's my hope anyway. That's why I'm risking everything to tell you this. Because if what I found on the moon is real, and it is, God help me, it is, then everything changes. Everything. And you deserve to know before it's too late. Before they come for you too, asking questions about what you know and who you've told. So listen carefully. Remember what I'm about to tell you. And whatever you do, don't let them make you forget. Let me tell you who I was before all of this happened. Before the moon. Before the impossible truth. Before I became a man living on borrowed time with a target on his back. My name is Jake Millerson, born in Duluth, Minnesota in 1989. Middle-class family, nothing special. Dad worked at the paper mill for 30 years. Mom was a school teacher. I had a younger sister, Emma, who wanted to be a veterinarian. We grew up going to church every Sunday, Lutheran, the kind where everyone's polite and sings hymns and nobody gets too excited about anything. I believed in God the way most kids believe in God, which is to say, I didn't really think about it much. God was just there, like gravity or the sky, something the adults told you about and you nodded along because that's what you did. I prayed before bed sometimes, asked for help with tests or for the Twins to win the World Series. Nothing deep, nothing real. I didn't know what real faith looked like yet. I didn't know what it cost. I joined the Marines right out of high school in 2007. Not because I was particularly patriotic or because I came from a military family. I just didn't know what else to do with my life. College felt pointless. Staying in Duluth felt like slow death, and the recruiter made it sound like an adventure. They always do, don't they? Make it sound like you'll see the world, become a man, be part of something bigger than yourself. What they don't tell you is that something bigger often means carrying your best friend's body parts in a trash bag because an IED turned him into hamburger meat right in front of you. They don't mention the smell. That's what stays with you more than anything else. The smell of burning human flesh mixed with diesel fuel and desert dust. You never forget that smell. It gets into your nose, your throat, your dreams. 20 years later, you'll smell someone grilling meat at a barbecue and you'll be right back there, hands shaking, trying not to vomit in front of your neighbors. I did 2 tours in Afghanistan, 2008 to 2010, and then 2011 to 2013. Camp Leatherneck, Helmand Province mostly, sometime in Kandahar. Infantry. Then I moved to Force Recon after my first tour. I was good at it. The violence, the hypervigilance, the split-second decisions that meant life or death. You get addicted to it after a while. That adrenaline rush, that clarity. Everything becomes simple in combat. There's the mission, and there's survival, and nothing else matters. No complicated relationships, no uncertain future, no existential questions about meaning or purpose. Just you and your rifle, and the guys next to you who die for you without hesitation. I lost a lot of those guys. Hendricks took a round through the throat in Sangin. Davies stepped on a pressure plate outside Marja. They found his boots 50 feet away with his feet still in them. Kowalski made it home but ate his gun 6 months later in his parents' garage. Nobody talks about that part. How many of us kill ourselves after we get back because we can't figure out how to live in a world that isn't trying to kill us every second? But here's what really broke me. What made me stop believing in God, if I ever really believed in the first place. It was October 2012, small village outside Kandahar whose name I never learned. We got intel about a Taliban weapons cache. Went in at dawn like we always did. Standard operation. Fast, loud, overwhelming force. Except the intel was wrong. Happens more than you'd think. The building we hit wasn't storing weapons. It was full of families. Kids. I was the first one through the door, and I saw a little girl, maybe 6 years old, standing in the corner in a pink dress holding a doll. She had these huge dark eyes, and she was frozen. Too scared to even cry. For just a second, she reminded me of my sister at that age. And then someone behind me thought they saw movement and opened fire, and that little girl just came apart, just ceased to exist in a fraction of a second. One moment, a living, breathing human being with thoughts and feelings and a future. The next moment, just meat and blood and a pink dress in a spreading pool of red. We found out later there was no weapons cache. The intel came from a rival tribal elder trying to settle a grudge. 14 civilians dead, including 6 children. It was ruled a justified engagement because we'd received credible intelligence and followed proper rules of engagement. Credible intelligence, proper rules of engagement. Those words still make me want to put my fist through a wall. We murdered a family, killed a little girl who'd never hurt anyone, who'd never even had a chance to grow up and fall in love or have her own kids, or do anything except exist for 6 brief years before American bullets tore her apart. And it was justified. We got commendations. We moved on to the next mission. And I realized right then, standing in that room with blood on my boots and that little girl's doll on the floor next to her body, that if there was a God, if there was any kind of loving divine presence in the universe, he wouldn't let this happen. He wouldn't let children die screaming in the dark because of lies and politics and oil. He wouldn't create a world this broken, this cruel, this utterly devoid of meaning or justice. So I stopped believing, just like that. Stopped praying, stopped going to chapel, stopped pretending there was any higher purpose to what we were doing. It was just meat and blood and chaos, and then you died, and that was it. Nothing waiting for you on the other side. No judgment, no reward, no punishment. Just darkness, nothingness. In a weird way, it was almost comforting, that nihilism. If nothing mattered, then nothing I'd done mattered either. The people I'd killed, the friends I'd lost, the little girl in the pink dress, all of it was just meaningless noise in an indifferent universe. I finished my second tour operating on autopilot, did what I was told, stopped thinking about any of it. Got my honorable discharge in 2013 with a chest full of medals I threw in a drawer and never looked at again. Bronze Star for valor, Purple Heart for a piece of shrapnel that left a scar across my ribs, Combat Action Ribbon, all of it meaningless. Coming home was harder than combat in a lot of ways. At least in Afghanistan I had a purpose, even if it was bullshit. Back in Minnesota, I was just another unemployed veteran with PTSD and anger issues trying to figure out how to function in a world where people complained about traffic and argued about sports and had no idea what real violence looked like. I couldn't hold down a normal job. Too many triggers, too much rage bubbling under the surface. I'd be stocking shelves at Home Depot, and some customer would come up behind me without warning, and I'd spin around with my fist raised ready to kill them before I remembered where I was. After the third job fired me, I stopped trying, lived off my military pension and disability, 70% for PTSD, and tried to drink myself to death slowly. My sister Emma called every week, tried to get me to come to family dinners, to see a therapist, to do anything except sit in my apartment drinking whiskey and cleaning guns I hoped I'd never have to use. She meant well, but she didn't understand. Nobody who hasn't been there can understand. Eventually, I ran out of money and had to find work. Ended up in private security, mall cop shit mostly. But it paid the bills. I was overqualified, and everyone knew it. This decorated Marine infantry veteran checking IDs at a corporate office building in downtown Minneapolis. But it was mindless work, and nobody bothered me. And that's all I wanted. Just to be left alone with my ghosts, and my guilt, and my certainty that the universe was empty and cold, and didn't give a damn about any of us. I figured I'd do this until I drank myself to death, or finally worked up the courage to eat my gun like Kowalski did. Didn't matter which. It would all end the same way anyway. Darkness, silence, nothing. That's who I was when they found me. That's the man they recruited for a mission that would prove everything I believed was wrong. A broken, faithless, suicidal veteran who'd convinced himself there was no God because he couldn't live in a world where God existed and allowed the things he'd seen. They chose me specifically because of that. Because they knew what I'd seen on the moon would either save me or destroy me completely. And honestly, I still don't know which one it did. The phone call came on a Tuesday night in March 2019. I remember because I'd just gotten home from a 12-hour shift at the Ameriprise Financial Building, my feet aching and my head fuzzy from the half pint of Jack Daniels I'd killed on the bus ride home. It was 2:17 in the morning when my phone started buzzing on the nightstand, the screen lighting up my dark bedroom like a flashbang. No caller ID, just a string of zeros where the number should be. I almost didn't answer. Who the hell calls at 2 in the morning with good news? but something made me pick up. Maybe intuition, maybe fate, maybe just the part of my brain that was still wired for combat telling me this was important. I swiped to answer and brought the phone to my ear and said nothing, just waited. Old habit from the Marines. Never speak first. Let them show their cards. There was silence on the other end for maybe 5 seconds, then a man's voice, calm and professional, with just a hint of southern accent buried under years of corporate polish. "Jake Millerson," he said. Not a question, a statement. "We need to talk." "Who is this?" I asked, already swinging my legs out of bed, fully alert now despite the alcohol. Something about the way he said my name, the confidence in it, set off every alarm bell in my head. "Someone who knows what you did in Kandahar," the voice said. "October 7th, 2012, the village outside the city. The little girl in the pink dress." My blood went cold. That wasn't in any official report. That detail, the pink dress, I'd never told anyone that. Never written it down, never said it out loud, kept it locked away in the part of my brain where I stored things too horrible to acknowledge. "How do you—" I started, but he cut me off. "We know everything, Jake. We know about Specialist Hendricks bleeding out in your arms in Sangin. We know about the IED outside Marja that turned Davies into pink mist. We know you were 17 meters away when Corporal Ramirez took a sniper round through the eye socket. We know about the scar on your right ribcage from the shrapnel in Helmand. We know you drink exactly half a pint of Jack Daniels every night before bed, and you sleep with a loaded Glock 19 in your nightstand drawer. We know you called your sister 3 times last month and hung up before she answered because you didn't know what to say to her. We know everything about you, and we're offering you a chance to make it mean something." I should have hung up right then, should have thrown the phone across the room, packed a bag, and disappeared. When someone knows that much about you, when they can reach into your life and pull out details that should be impossible to know, you're already in danger. But I didn't hang up, because he was right. I wanted it to mean something, all of it, all the blood and death and nightmares. I wanted it to add up to something more than just trauma and guilt and wasted years. "What do you want?" I asked, my hand already moving to the nightstand drawer, fingers wrapping around the Glock's grip. Just holding it made me feel better, more in control, even though I knew if they wanted me dead, I'd already be dead. "We want to offer you a job," the voice said. "Recovery operation, remote location, specialized skills required, extreme discretion necessary. 3 months of your time. $2 million deposited in an offshore account of your choosing upon successful completion. No taxes, no questions, no records. $2 million. That kind of money doesn't exist for people like me, not legitimately. That's drug cartel money, arms dealer money, money that comes with bodies attached. What's the catch?" I asked. "There's always a catch with that kind of money." The voice actually chuckled, a dry sound like dead leaves blowing across pavement. "The catch is, you can never talk about it, ever, to anyone. You'll sign documents that make your military NDAs look like birthday cards. You'll undergo screening that makes a polygraph look like a handshake. And if you violate the terms of your agreement, you'll disappear so completely your own mother won't be able to find your grave." He paused. "Let that sink in. But you'll be alive and rich, which is better than where you're headed now, drinking yourself to death in a studio apartment working mall security. So what do you say, Jake? You interested?" I sat there in the dark, holding my gun, staring at nothing. Every instinct screamed this was wrong, that legitimate work doesn't come with death threats and offshore accounts. But every instinct also told me this man was serious, that he could deliver on both the money and the threat, and that if I said no right now, someone else would get this opportunity. Someone else would get the chance to do something meaningful, even if I didn't know what that something was yet. "What's the job?" I asked. "Where's the remote location? What am I recovering?" "Those details will be provided if you accept a preliminary meeting," the voice said. "Tomorrow night, 10 p.m., warehouse on the corner of Industrial Boulevard and 37th Street North in Minneapolis. Come alone, come unarmed. You'll be searched and anything you bring will be confiscated. If you're late, the offer expires. If you tell anyone, the offer expires. If we detect any recording devices or if you're under surveillance, the offer expires and you become a liability we need to manage. Do you understand?" I understood perfectly. This was the point of no return. Show up to that meeting and my life would change forever, one way or another. "I'll be there," I heard myself say, and immediately wondered if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life or the best decision I'd ever make. The next day crawled by like a wounded animal. I called in sick to work, spent the hours pacing my apartment, cleaning my guns, doing push-ups until my arms shook, anything to burn off the nervous energy. I kept picking up my phone to call Emma, to call someone, to tell somebody where I was going in case I disappeared. But I didn't. Whatever this was, whoever these people were, they'd been watching me long enough to know my routines, my habits, my secrets. If they wanted me dead, I'd already be dead. And if they were offering me $2 million for 3 months of work, maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. I'd survived 2 tours in Afghanistan, survived IEDs and firefights and Taliban ambushes. I could survive 1 meeting in a warehouse. At 9:30 p.m., I took a cab to within 6 blocks of the location, paid cash, walked the rest of the way. The warehouse district at night was exactly as empty and industrial as you'd expect. Chain-link fences, graffiti-covered walls, the distant sound of traffic on I-94. The building at the corner of Industrial and 37th was a squat concrete structure with no windows and a single steel door. No signs, no lights, nothing to indicate what it was or who owned it. I checked my watch, 9:54 p.m. Early, but not suspiciously early. I'd left my Glock at home like instructed, but I'd tucked a small folding knife into my boot just in case. Not much good against professionals, but better than nothing. I approached the door and knocked 3 times, the sound echoing flatly in the empty street. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I heard bolts sliding back, and the door opened inward. The man who stood there was exactly what I expected. Mid-40s, fit, military posture. The kind of generic professional appearance that made him instantly forgettable. Khakis, blue button-down shirt, face you'd forget 5 seconds after looking at it. "Jake Millerson," he said. Not a question. "Arms out." I raised my arms and he patted me down efficiently, found the knife in my boot within seconds. He held it up, looked at me with what might have been amusement. "Cute," he said, pocketing it. "You'll get it back when you leave. If you leave. Come with me." He turned and walked into the darkness of the warehouse, and I followed, the door clanging shut behind us with a finality that made my stomach tighten. We walked through absolute blackness for maybe 30 seconds. I counted my steps, mapped the space by sound, old infantry habits dying hard. Then light bloomed ahead of us, and we entered a space that made no sense. The warehouse was empty, except for a conference table in the center, surrounded by 4 high-powered work lights that created an island of brightness in an ocean of shadow. 3 men sat at the table, all of them wearing suits that probably cost more than my car. Behind them, standing in the shadows, I could make out at least 3 more figures. Security, definitely armed, probably with orders to shoot me if this went wrong. The man in the center stood up as I approached, extending his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Millerson," he said, "thank you for coming. I'm Dr. Richard Kellerman. Please, have a seat." I didn't shake his hand, just pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down, keeping my back straight, my hands visible on the table. Show no fear, show no weakness. "You said you had a job," I said. "So far, all I've seen is theatrics and threats. Let's skip to the part where you tell me what you actually want." Kellerman's smile widened slightly, and this time it almost looked genuine. "I like you, Jake. No bullshit, no games. Straight to business. Okay." He reached down beside his chair and pulled out a manila folder, set it on the table between us. "What do you know about the Apollo program?" I blinked, thrown by the sudden shift. "The moon landings? Not much. Happened in the 60s and 70s. We put some guys up there, planted a flag, came home. Why?" Kellerman opened the folder and slid a black and white photograph across the table. I looked down at it, saw what appeared to be a lunar module on the surface of the moon. American flag planted nearby, footprints in the dust. Standard stuff. "Apollo 17, Kellerman said. "December 1972. The last official Apollo mission to reach the lunar surface. Officially, the program ended there due to budget cuts and waning public interest." He pulled out another photograph, this one showing a different lunar module, the image grainier, darker, something wrong about it that I couldn't immediately identify. Unofficially, there was one more mission, Apollo 18, April 1973. 3 astronauts, classified payload, landing coordinates on the far side of the moon where no one had ever been before. He looked at me intently. "They found something up there, Jake. Something impossible. And then they stopped transmitting." I stared at the photograph, that feeling of wrongness growing stronger. The lunar module in the image looked damaged somehow, pieces missing, the American flag torn. What did they find? I asked quietly. Kellerman leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. That's what we need you to help us recover. The astronauts transmitted a set of coordinates before communication ceased. Orbital imagery shows an anomaly, a structure, not natural, not man-made, not anything that should exist on an airless dead rock floating in space. We need someone to go up there, enter that structure, and bring back what's inside. The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. He wanted to send me to the moon, to recover something from a mission that officially never happened, from a structure that couldn't possibly exist. I should have laughed, should have stood up and walked out. But I looked at the three men sitting across from me, at the armed shadows behind them, at the photograph of a damaged lunar module on a place no human had been in almost 50 years, and I saw in Kellerman's eyes that he was absolutely serious. "When do we leave?" I asked, and somewhere in the darkness behind me, I heard someone exhale like they'd been holding their breath. Kellerman smiled when I asked when we'd leave, a real smile this time, like I'd just passed some kind of test he'd been waiting for me to fail. He gestured to one of the other men at the table, a younger guy with wire-rimmed glasses and the nervous energy of someone who spent too much time with computers and not enough with people. "This is Dr. Marcus Chen," Kellerman said. "He'll walk you through the technical details. But first, I need to make absolutely certain you understand what you're agreeing to." He pulled out another folder, this one much thicker, and slid it across the table. I opened it and found myself looking at page after page of dense legal text, the kind of document that takes a team of lawyers weeks to draft. Non-disclosure agreements, liability waivers, security clearances, financial arrangements, and buried in the middle of it all, a single paragraph that made my blood run cold. It stated in explicit legal language that if I violated any terms of the agreement, the United States government, though it never specifically said which agency or department, retained the right to detain me indefinitely without trial, to seize all my assets, and to take any and all measures deemed necessary to protect national security interests. That was code. I'd seen enough classified briefings to know what any and all measures meant. It meant they could kill me, and no one would ever know. "You're asking me to sign my life away," I said, looking up at Kellerman. "Literally." He nodded, no apology in his expression. "Yes, we are. Because what you're going to see, what you're going to do, what you're going to learn, it changes everything. It changes how we understand history, religion, our place in the universe. That kind of information is dangerous. It causes panic, destabilizes governments, shatters belief systems that billions of people depend on to make sense of their lives. So yes, we need absolute assurance that you'll never speak about this. Not to your sister, not to a priest, not to a therapist, not to anyone. The penalty for breaking that silence is death. I won't sugarcoat it. You sign these documents, you belong to us for the rest of your life." I looked down at the papers again, flipping through page after page of legal jargon that all boiled down to the same thing: shut up or die. Part of me wanted to stand up and walk out right then, but another part, the part that had been rotting away in that studio apartment, drinking myself to death one night at a time, that part was already hooked. Because whatever this was, whatever impossible thing they were asking me to do, it was real, real enough to kill for, real enough to spend millions of dollars recruiting a broken veteran for, real enough to build all this elaborate secrecy around. "Tell me about Apollo 18, I said, pushing the unsigned documents aside for the moment. "Tell me what really happened up there." Dr. Chen leaned forward, adjusting his glasses, and pulled out a tablet. He tapped the screen a few times and then turned it to face me. The image showed what looked like mission control footage from the early 70s, grainy, black and white. Timestamp in the corner reading April 24th, 1973. 3 astronauts in their seats, American flags on their shoulders, looking exactly like every other Apollo crew I'd ever seen in history documentaries. "Apollo 18, Chen said, his voice surprisingly steady for someone who looked like he'd never been in a fight in his life. "Commander Nathan Miller, Lunar Module Pilot Robert Kane, Command Module Pilot Stephen Walker. Officially, this mission was canceled in September 1970 due to budget constraints. Unofficially, it launched from Kennedy Space Center at 0400 hours on April 21st, 1973. Media blackout. No public announcement. The crew was told they were conducting geological surveys on the far side of the moon, areas that had never been photographed in detail. That was a lie." He swiped to another image. this one showing what appeared to be satellite imagery of the lunar surface, a crater-pocked landscape of gray and black. The real mission was to investigate this. He zoomed in on one particular crater, and my breath caught. There, in the center of the crater, was something that didn't belong. A geometric shape, too regular to be natural, partially buried in lunar dust but clearly visible from orbit. "What am I looking at?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer was going to be insane. "We don't know," Kellerman interjected. "That's why we need you to go there." Soviet lunar probes detected an anomalous radar signature in this region in 1971. At first, we thought it was just their equipment malfunctioning. The far side of the moon is notorious for interference. But when our own satellites confirmed it, when we sent higher resolution imaging and saw that structure, we knew we had a problem. Something was on the moon. Something that predated human space exploration. Something that shouldn't exist. Chen swiped to the next image and I felt my stomach drop. It was a transcript of radio communications, time-stamped April 24th, 1973, 1647 GMT. I read the words, my mouth going dry. "Houston, this is Apollo 18. We've reached the coordinates. Confirming visual on the anomaly. Christ, Houston, it's not natural. Repeat, the structure is not natural. It appears to be metallic, partially excavated from the crater wall. There are markings on the surface. We're moving in for a closer look." Then, several minutes later, "Houston, we're inside the structure. There's a chamber here, some kind of artifact in the center. It's covered in writing. Bob thinks it might be Hebrew. Stephen, are you getting this on camera? You need to see this. You all need to see this." And then, the final transmission. "Oh my God. Oh my God. Houston, do you see this? Do you understand what this means? Everything was real. All of it. And then nothing. Just static." "They stopped transmitting at 1658 GMT, Chen said quietly. "We tried to re-establish contact for 3 hours. Nothing. The command module was still in orbit. Walker was up there alone, going out of his mind trying to raise his crew. He reported seeing lights from the surface, flashes he couldn't explain. By hour 4, he was ordered to return to Earth without them. He refused. It took a direct order from the president to get him to fire the return engines. He cried the entire flight home. 63 hours alone in that capsule, knowing he'd left his friends to die on the moon, and he cried until he had no tears left. I stared at the transcript, at those final words. Everything was real. All of it. What the hell had they found down there? Walker never spoke about it publicly, Kellerman continued. We debriefed him for 6 months, kept him in an isolation facility in Nevada, and then gave him a new identity and a comfortable retirement in Montana. He died in 2003. Heart attack, officially. But he left behind journals, dozens of them, filled with sketches of what he saw through his telescope while orbiting above that crater. Sketches of his crewmates walking into that structure and never coming out. Sketches of symbols he didn't understand, but felt compelled to draw over and over again. And one sentence, repeated on nearly every page: God was watching. God was always watching. The warehouse seemed colder suddenly, or maybe it was just me. "You want me to go to that structure?" I said slowly. 50 years after those astronauts disappeared. "You want me to go inside and find whatever they found?" "Not just find it," Kellerman corrected. "Recover it. Bring it back. We've spent 5 decades analyzing orbital imagery, studying the structure from a distance, trying to understand what it is and what happened to Miller and Kane. We've developed technology that didn't exist in 1973. Better suits, better equipment, better communication systems. We can do this now. We can finish what they started. But we need someone with your skill set. Someone who's been in hostile environments, who knows how to operate under extreme pressure, who can make life or death decisions without hesitation. Someone who, frankly, doesn't have much to lose if things go wrong." That last part stung because it was true. I didn't have much to lose. No family except Emma, who I barely talked to. No career worth mentioning. No future except more of the same slow suicide I'd been committing for the last 6 years. If I died on the moon, would anyone even notice? Would anyone care? "The $2 million, I said. "That's real? Not some bait and switch where I sign my life away and get nothing?" Kellerman nodded. "It's real. Deposited in an account in the Cayman Islands within 24 hours of mission completion. Clean money, untraceable, yours to do with as you please. You could disappear to some tropical island and drink yourself to death in luxury if that's what you want, or you could invest it, build a life, take care of your sister, whatever you want. as long as you never speak about where it came from." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. "But I want you to understand something, Jake. This isn't just about the money. This is about answering the biggest question humanity has ever asked. Are we alone? And based on what Apollo 18 found, the answer is no. We're not alone. We never were. And whatever's in that structure, whatever those astronauts saw before they died, it's important enough that we're willing to risk everything to bring it back." I sat there for a long moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on me like a physical thing. This was insane. Utterly, completely insane. Secret moon missions, ancient structures, missing astronauts, government conspiracies. It sounded like a bad science fiction movie, but the documents were real. The photographs were real. The transcript of Apollo 18's final transmission was real. And the three men sitting across from me, with their expensive suits, and their armed guards and their willingness to kill to protect their secrets, they were definitely real. I thought about that little girl in the pink dress, the one whose death had convinced me God didn't exist. I thought about all the men I'd killed, all the friends I'd lost, all the nights I'd spent staring at my ceiling, wondering what the point of any of it was. And I thought about the words in that final transmission. Everything was real. All of it. What if it was? What if there was meaning after all? Some kind of cosmic purpose that I'd been too blind and broken to see? What if going to the moon, walking into that impossible structure, finding whatever ancient secret was waiting there? What if that was the reason I'd survived Afghanistan when so many others hadn't? What if this was what I was meant to do? "I need to know one thing," I said finally. "If I go up there and I find whatever's in that structure, are you going to bury it? Lock it away in some warehouse and pretend it doesn't exist? Or are you actually going to do something with it?" Kellerman smiled, but it was a sad smile, the kind that told me he'd already thought about this question a lot. "Honestly, Jake, I don't know. That decision is way above my pay grade. I'm just the recruiter. I find the people, I make the offers, I get them to sign the papers. What happens after you bring it back? That's up to people whose names I've never heard and whose faces I've never seen. But I can tell you this, whatever's up there, it's important enough that they've been planning this mission for 50 years. It's important enough that they're willing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars and risk international incidents and break every treaty we've ever signed about lunar exploration. So yeah, I think they're going to do something with it. Whether that something is good or bad, whether they share it with the world or hide it forever, that I can't tell you. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was an honest one. And maybe that was enough. Maybe I didn't need to know the endgame. Maybe I just needed to know that there was one, that this wasn't all just random chaos and meaningless death. I picked up the pen lying next to the stack of documents and clicked it once, the sound sharp in the silent warehouse. "Where do I sign?" I asked, and Dr. Kellerman's smile widened. "Every page with a red tab," he said. "Initial the yellow tabs, full signature on the red ones. Take your time. Read it all if you want, though I promise it all says the same thing. Keep your mouth shut and we'll make you rich, talk and we'll make you disappear." I didn't read it. I just started signing, page after page, initialing and signing and dating, legally binding myself to an organization I couldn't name for a mission I didn't fully understand, to a place that shouldn't have anything on it worth dying for. It took almost 20 minutes to get through all the documents. When I finally signed the last page and pushed the stack back across the table, Kellerman gathered them up with the reverence of someone handling religious texts. "Congratulations, Jake," he said. "You're now a member of the most secret program in human history, Project Shepherd. Welcome aboard. Your training starts in 72 hours. Say goodbye to your old life. You won't be seeing it again for a while." 72 hours after I signed those documents, a black sedan pulled up outside my apartment at exactly 6 a.m. No horn, no phone call, just the quiet purr of an engine idling in the street below my window. I'd been awake since 4, couldn't sleep knowing this was coming. My duffel bag packed with the few things they'd told me I could bring. Toiletries, personal items, nothing electronic, nothing that could be tracked or traced. I'd spent the last 3 days in a strange limbo, going through the motions of ending my old life. I'd quit my security job with a text message, told my landlord I was leaving and he could keep the deposit. Stood in front of my phone for an hour trying to figure out what to say to Emma, before finally sending her a message that said, "Got a job opportunity overseas. Don't know when I'll be back. Love you. Stay safe." She'd responded with a string of questions I'd never answered. I walked down to the street carrying my bag, and the back door of the sedan opened before I even reached it. Inside sat a woman in her 30s, dark hair pulled back severely, eyes hidden behind sunglasses despite the early morning darkness. "Get in," she said, her voice flat and professional. "We have a long drive ahead of us." I climbed in, the door closed, and we pulled away from the curb. I watched my apartment building disappear in the side mirror, and something told me I'd never see it again. I was right. The drive took 11 hours, straight west on highways that grew increasingly empty as we left civilization behind. The woman, she never gave me her name and I never asked, said almost nothing the entire trip. We stopped once for gas and bathroom breaks at a truck stop in the middle of nowhere, and she stood outside the men's room door the entire time I was inside, like she thought I might try to run. Where would I run to? I'd signed the papers. I'd taken their money. Well, promised money. I was committed now, for better or worse. By the time we finally turned off the main highway onto a dirt road that didn't appear on any map, the sun was setting behind distant mountains and my ass was numb from sitting so long. We drove for another 40 minutes through desert scrubland, nothing but Joshua trees and rocks and emptiness in every direction, until we reached a chain-link fence with razor wire on top and a gate that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. The woman pulled out a key card, swiped it through a reader hidden in the fence post, and the gate swung open smoothly, well-oiled hinges making no sound. We drove through, and I watched in the mirror as the gate closed behind us with the finality of a prison door slamming shut. Another 10 minutes of driving, and we reached what looked like an abandoned mining facility. A few rusted buildings, an old water tower, equipment left to decay in the desert heat. "This is it?" I asked, breaking the silence for the first time in hours. The woman smiled, the first emotion I'd seen from her all day. "This is the entrance," she said. "The facility is below." We parked next to what looked like a collapsed maintenance shed, and the woman led me inside. The interior was exactly as decrepit as the exterior suggested. Rotted wood, broken windows, dust thick enough to write your name in. She walked to the back corner, knelt down, and pulled up what I'd thought was just more debris to reveal a metal hatch set into the concrete floor. She spun the wheel lock, pulled it open, and gestured down into darkness. "After you," she said. I looked down into a vertical shaft with a ladder bolted to the side, disappearing into blackness below. Every instinct screamed trap, but I'd come this far. I grabbed the ladder rungs and started climbing down. After about 30 feet, the industrial ladder ended, and I dropped onto a metal grating. Motion sensor lights flickered on, revealing a corridor that looked like it had been carved directly out of bedrock, reinforced with steel and concrete, stretching away into the distance. The woman dropped down behind me, landing with practiced ease. "Welcome to Site 17, she said. "You're home for the next 8 months. I hope you're not claustrophobic." She wasn't kidding about the 8 months. From that moment on, my life became a blur of training, studying, testing, and preparation, unlike anything I'd experienced even in the Marines. The facility was massive, an underground complex that must have cost billions to construct and operate, all of it hidden beneath an abandoned mine in the Nevada desert. There were at least 100 personnel down there, scientists, engineers, trainers, medical staff, security, all of them working on Project Shepherd, all of them bound by the same ironclad NDAs that I'd signed. The first person I met after being shown to my quarters, a windowless room with a bed, a desk, and a bathroom that felt like a slightly nicer version of a prison cell, was Dr. Marcus Chen, the nervous guy with glasses from the warehouse meeting, except he didn't seem nervous anymore. Down here, in his element, surrounded by computers and technical equipment and whiteboards covered in equations I couldn't begin to understand, he was confident, even excited. "Jake," he said, shaking my hand enthusiastically. "Good to see you again. I'm glad you accepted. We've got a lot of work to do and not a lot of time to do it. Come on, let me show you the lab." I followed him through a maze of corridors until we reached a large room that looked like a cross between NASA Mission Control and a university physics lab. Screens covered one wall, showing everything from orbital trajectories to 3D models of the lunar surface to what looked like medical readouts. In the center of the room sat a perfect replica of a lunar module, and next to it, 3 spacesuits that looked nothing like the bulky white EVA suits I'd seen in history books. These were sleeker, more form-fitting, covered in a material that seemed to shimmer and shift in the light. "These are the Leva suits," Chen said, running his hand over one reverently. "Low-profile extravehicular activity. Carbon nanotube weave with integrated temperature regulation, radiation shielding, and a closed-loop life support system that can keep you alive for 72 hours without resupply. They're worth about $50 million each, and they're the most advanced pieces of technology humanity has ever created. You're going to learn to live in one. The other member of our crew arrived 2 days later. Captain Sarah Rodriguez, ex-Air Force, pilot with more flight hours than I had days of life experience, and the kind of person who radiated competence so strongly you felt like an idiot just standing next to her. She was 42, Latina, with close-cropped hair and eyes that missed nothing. We met in the cafeteria. Yes, the facility had a cafeteria, complete with decent food and terrible coffee, and she sized me up in about 3 seconds before extending her hand. "You're the Marine," she said, not a question. "Millerson, right? Combat vet, Force Recon, 2 tours Afghanistan." I shook her hand, impressed despite myself. "You do your homework," she shrugged. "I like to know who I'm trusting my life to." "For what it's worth, your record is solid. Decorated, good instincts, can handle pressure. That matters up there. The moon doesn't give a damn about your feelings. Make a mistake, and you're dead before you even realize you fucked up." I liked her immediately. No bullshit, no false camaraderie. Just straight talk from someone who understood that this mission was serious. "What about you?" I asked. "What's your story?" She grabbed a coffee, I wasn't kidding about it being terrible, and sat down across from me. 20 years Air Force, started as a fighter jock, transitioned to test pilot when I got bored with just blowing things up. I've flown everything from F-16s to experimental hypersonic aircraft that officially don't exist. Did a stint at Edwards testing lunar landing simulators for a program that supposedly got canceled. Turns out it didn't get canceled, it just went black. They recruited me 8 months ago. Been training solo until you two signed on. I know the mission profile, I know what we're likely to face up there, and I know the odds of all 3 of us coming back alive are maybe 60%. I'm doing it anyway because this is the only thing in my entire life that's actually mattered. Flying fighters was fun, but it was just politics and posturing. This is real. This is the thing people will be talking about in 100 years, if we succeed. And I intend to succeed, I nodded slowly. 60% survival odds. Better than Afghanistan, actually. So, what's the plan? When do we launch? Rodriguez took a long sip of her terrible coffee, grimaced, and set it down. "Launch window opens in 7 months. We'll go up on a Falcon Heavy derivative that SpaceX built specifically for this mission. They think they're launching a classified military satellite, which technically isn't a lie. Transit time is 4 days there, 4 days back, plus however long it takes us to explore the structure, secure the artifact, and get back to the lander. Total mission time, 3 weeks, give or take. But between now and then, we're going to train harder than you've ever trained in your life. Lunar surface operations, zero-gravity maneuvering, equipment maintenance, emergency procedures, medical training, and about 6 dozen different ways to die if we screw up. Chen will handle the technical and scientific aspects. I'll pilot the lander and manage all the systems. And you," she pointed at me with her coffee cup. "You're our muscle and our problem solver. If something goes wrong on the surface, if we encounter something unexpected, if Chen and I are too busy keeping us alive to deal with whatever comes up, that's on you. You're the one who figures it out and fixes it. No pressure." She smiled, but it wasn't a reassuring smile. It was the smile of someone who'd seen enough death to know it was always one mistake away. The training started the next day and didn't stop for 8 months. Every single day, 12 to 16 hours, learning systems and procedures and physics and emergency protocols until they were as natural as breathing. We spent weeks in the neutral buoyancy tank, a massive swimming pool where they'd submerged mock-ups of the lunar surface, learning to move in a spacesuit, learning to work together, learning what it felt like when your life depended on a thin layer of fabric between you and the void. Chen turned out to be a devout Christian, which surprised me. You don't meet many scientists who openly talk about their faith, but Chen wore his like a badge of honor. He had a small cross on a chain around his neck that he never took off, and more than once I caught him praying quietly before we started a particularly difficult training session. One night, maybe 4 months into training, I asked him about it. We were in the rec room. Yes, the facility even had one of those, with a TV that only played pre-approved movies and books that had all been cleared by security, and it was just the 2 of us. Rodriguez had gone to bed early, something about needing to review flight plans. Chen was reading his Bible, actual paper Bible, pages worn soft from constant handling. Can I ask you something? I said. He looked up, marked his place with a finger. Of course. How do you square it? I asked. Being a scientist and being religious? I mean, we're about to go to the moon to investigate an ancient alien structure. Doesn't that kind of contradict everything religion teaches? Chen smiled, that patient smile of someone who'd been asked this question 1,000 times. Not at all. Science tells us how things work. Religion tells us why they matter. I can study physics and chemistry and mathematics, understand the mechanics of the universe, and still believe there's a creator behind it all. In fact, the more I learn about how intricate and precise everything is, the more I'm convinced there has to be a designer. The universe doesn't run on chaos, Jake. It runs on laws, mathematical laws that never change, that work the same way everywhere. That's not random. That's intentional. I thought about that for a while, turning it over in my mind. What about the structure? I asked. What do you think it is? What do you think we're going to find up there? Chen's smile faded, replaced by something more serious, almost troubled. I think we're going to find proof, he said quietly. Proof that the Bible was right, that humans aren't alone, that we've been watched and documented, that everything our ancestors wrote about angels and demons and divine intervention, it all actually happened. Those astronauts from Apollo 18, their last words were, "Everything was real." I think they found evidence of God, Jake. Not metaphorical, not symbolic, actual physical evidence. And I think that's what we're going up there to bring back. His words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Part of me wanted to laugh, to tell him he was crazy, that he was letting his religion cloud his judgment. But I couldn't, because I'd seen the photographs. I'd read the transcripts. I'd spent 4 months training for a mission that shouldn't be necessary if the moon was just a dead rock with nothing on it. Whatever was up there, whatever those astronauts had found, it was real enough to spend billions of dollars and 50 years planning to go back. And if you're right, I asked, if we find proof of God up there, what then? What does that change? Chen closed his Bible, set it carefully on the table beside him. Everything, he said simply. It changes everything. Because if God is real, if he's been watching us all along, documenting our history, intervening in our affairs, then every choice we've ever made matters. Every sin, every kindness, every moment of doubt or faith, it all matters because we're being judged for it. Not by other humans, not by history, but by the creator of the universe himself. That's a terrifying thought, honestly. But it's also comforting, because it means nothing is meaningless. Not the good things, not the bad things, not even the horrible things. It all serves a purpose, even if we can't see it yet. I thought about the little girl in the pink dress, about all the death I'd witnessed and caused, about the years I'd spent convinced it was all meaningless chaos. I hope you're wrong, I said finally, because if God is real and he's been watching everything, then he's got a lot to answer for. Chen just nodded, sadness in his eyes. I know, and maybe that's why we're going up there. Maybe we'll get some of those answers, or maybe we'll just find more questions. Either way, we'll know the truth. And isn't that worth dying for? The last month of training was the hardest. They put us through scenario after scenario, testing our reactions to every possible emergency. Equipment failures, medical emergencies, communications breakdowns, structural instabilities, anything and everything that could go wrong, they simulated it and watched how we responded. Rodriguez was ice cold under pressure, never panicked, always worked the problem logically. Chen was the opposite. He got emotional, stressed easily, but he was brilliant when it counted. Could solve technical problems in his head faster than most people could with computers. And me? I found out I was good at making the hard calls, the ones where someone might die but you have to choose anyway. They called it acceptable losses in the military. Here, they called it mission-critical decision-making. It amounted to the same thing, being willing to sacrifice one life to save two, being willing to abandon a crewmate if staying meant everyone died. I hated that I was good at it. The final test came 2 weeks before launch. They locked us in the Lunar module simulator, sealed the hatches, and then started throwing problems at us without warning. Fire in the cabin. Rodriguez handled it, extinguishers deployed, fire out in 30 seconds. Oxygen leak. Chen found it, patched it with the emergency kit. Guidance computer failure. Rodriguez switched to manual control, plotted a new trajectory by hand. Then they hit us with the big one. Catastrophic structural failure in Chen's suit during surface operations, total life support loss, unconscious crew member, and we were 10 minutes from the lander with only 8 minutes of emergency air in his backup tank. Rodriguez looked at me, her eyes asking the question she couldn't say out loud. Do we leave him? And I looked at Chen, unconscious in the simulation, his suit readings showing flatline, and I made the call. We carry him, I said. Both of us, one on each side, we move as fast as we can, and we don't stop. If we're 30 seconds from the lander when his air runs out, we're still 30 seconds closer than if we'd left him. We don't abandon crew. It was the right answer, apparently. The simulation ended, the lights came on, and Dr. Kellerman was standing there with a clipboard and something that might have been approval on his face. Congratulations, he said. You just passed your final evaluation. Launch is in 14 days. Get your affairs in order. Say your goodbyes. Because once we put you on that rocket, there's no coming back until the mission is complete, one way or another. The night before launch, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was nervous. 8 months of training had beaten most of the nervousness out of me, but because the reality of what we were about to do finally hit me like a freight train. Tomorrow, I was going to leave Earth. Tomorrow, I was going to sit on top of a controlled explosion containing more energy than a small nuclear bomb, ride it beyond the atmosphere, and travel 250,000 miles through the vacuum of space to a place where humans barely belonged. And when I got there, I was going to walk into a structure that shouldn't exist, built by beings we didn't understand, to recover an artifact that had driven the last crew insane with revelation. When you put it like that, sleep seemed like a waste of the last few hours of relative safety I had left. I spent the time writing a letter to Emma, knowing I'd never be able to send it, but needing to write it anyway. Told her I was sorry for disappearing, sorry for being a shitty brother, sorry for all the years I'd wasted being angry at a world that didn't deserve my anger. Told her I loved her, and that if I never came back, she should know that my last thoughts were of her, of us as kids building snow forts in the backyard, before war and death and trauma had turned me into someone I didn't recognize. I sealed the letter in an envelope, wrote her name on the front, and left it on my desk. If I died up there, someone would find it eventually. Maybe they'd even deliver it, though probably not. More likely, it would disappear into a classified file somewhere. One more secret in a program built on secrets. At 0400 hours, the lights in my quarters came on automatically, and a voice over the intercom, Rodriguez I recognized, said simply, "It's time." I got up, showered, put on the compression suit we'd wear under our spacesuits during launch. The thing felt like a full-body blood pressure cuff, designed to keep blood from pooling in our extremities during the high-G acceleration of launch. Over that went the cooling layer, a network of tubes that would circulate temperature-controlled water to keep us from overheating in the suits. Then finally the communications rig, electrodes that would monitor our vitals and allow us to talk to each other, and mission control. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. Somewhere over the last 8 months, I'd gotten lean and hard again, the muscle memory from my Marine days coming back, the soft edges of too much whiskey and too little purpose burned away. My eyes looked different too, focused, sharp, alive in a way they hadn't been in years. Maybe Chen was right. Maybe this mission was what I'd been surviving for all along. I grabbed my personal kit, just a small bag with toiletries and a few items they'd cleared for the trip, and headed to the staging area. Rodriguez and Chen were already there, both wearing their compression suits, both looking as ready as anyone could be for something like this. Chen was praying quietly, eyes closed, lips moving in silent conversation with a god I still wasn't sure I believed in. Rodriguez was checking equipment, triple-checking everything even though we'd checked it 100 times already, the kind of pre-flight ritual that kept pilots sane when they were about to trust their lives to machines. "Morning," I said, setting my bag down with the others. Rodriguez nodded, not looking up from her checklist. "Morning. You sleep?" "Not really." "Good. Sleep's overrated anyway." She finished her checklist, looked up at me with those sharp pilot eyes. "You ready for this? Last chance to back out. They'd probably be pissed, might even shoot you to protect the secret, but if you're having second thoughts, now's the time." I thought about it for maybe half a second. "I'm ready. Let's go find out what scared those astronauts bad enough they stopped transmitting." Chen opened his eyes, crossed himself, and stood up. Amen to that. A door opened, and Dr. Kellerman walked in, followed by a medical team. "Final medical check," he announced. "Strip down to your base layer. We need vitals, blood work, and psychological assessment. Standard pre-launch protocol." We spent the next hour being poked and prodded by doctors who took blood samples, checked our hearts and lungs, looked in our eyes and ears, asked us questions designed to make sure we weren't having mental breakdowns. It was invasive and uncomfortable and necessary because the last thing anyone needed was for one of us to have a medical emergency 100,000 miles from Earth. Finally, they cleared us. "You're good to go," the lead doctor said, a woman in her 50s who looked like she'd seen too much and cared too little. "Try not to die up there. The paperwork is a nightmare." The launch site wasn't Cape Canaveral or Vandenberg or any of the famous facilities you see on TV. It was a private spaceport in West Texas, built by one of those billionaire space companies and rented out to whoever could pay the obscene fees. Officially, we were launching a classified military satellite into high Earth orbit. The mission designation was NROL 347, National Reconnaissance Office Launch Number 347, just another spy satellite in a constellation of dozens. Nobody would question it. Nobody would pay attention. And by the time anyone noticed our trajectory was wrong, that we weren't going into Earth orbit but heading for the moon, we'd be too far away to stop. The rocket was a monster, a modified Falcon Heavy with a third stage that had been specially built for deep space missions. It stood on the pad like a white spear pointed at the sky, venting liquid oxygen in great billowing clouds that caught the pre-dawn light and glowed ethereal blue. Our spacecraft, they designated it Shepard 1 naturally, sat atop that rocket, a cramped capsule barely big enough for 3 people and the equipment we'd need to survive. Attached to it was the Lunar module, the Leva 1, which would separate once we were in lunar orbit and carry us down to the surface. 8 months of training, billions of dollars, 50 years of planning, all coming down to whether this rocket would work as designed or explode on the pad in a fireball visible from orbit. No pressure. We suited up in the gantry tower, the support crew helping us into the Levier suits piece by piece. First the lower section, legs and boots with integrated environmental controls. Then the torso, sealed and locked to the legs with redundant seals that would keep vacuum out and air in. Arms next. Gloves that felt like you were wearing oven mitts, but actually had enough dexterity to handle tools and equipment. And finally the helmet, a curved dome of transparent aluminum that gave you a 180-degree field of vision and would hopefully stop any micrometeoroids from turning your head into red mist. The helmet locked in place with a satisfying click, seals inflating automatically, and suddenly the world became distant and muffled. All I could hear was my own breathing and the hiss of air circulation and Rodriguez's voice in my comms. "Radio check. Millerson, you reading me?" "Loud and clear," I responded, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. "Chen? Here." Chen's voice came through, slightly higher pitched than normal. Stress, probably, or excitement. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. "All systems nominal. Life support green across the board. We're good to go." We rode the elevator up the gantry tower to the capsule access level, each step making it more real, more impossible to back out. At the top, a technician helped us crawl through the narrow hatch one by one, guiding us to our positions. Rodriguez in the center seat, pilot's position. She'd handle all the controls during launch. Chen on the left, systems engineer. He'd monitor all the spacecraft functions. And me on the right, mission specialist, which was a fancy way of saying the guy who does whatever needs doing. The seats were contoured to our bodies, custom-made based on 3D scans they'd done months ago, designed to support us during the high G forces of launch. Once we were strapped in, the technician gave us a thumbs up, said something I couldn't hear over the comms, and sealed the hatch. The metallic clang echoed in the small space, and suddenly we were alone. Just the 3 of us, and our thoughts and a 250,000-mile journey ahead of us. "Beginning pre-flight checklist," Rodriguez said, her voice steady and professional, falling into the routine we'd practiced hundreds of times. She started calling out systems, and Chen responded with status updates, a litany of technical jargon that was somehow comforting in its familiarity. Guidance system, online and aligned. Environmental controls, green. Pressure holding at 14.7 psi. Communications, we have telemetry to ground control. Encrypted channel is active. Power systems. Batteries charged, fuel cells ready, solar panels armed for deployment post-separation. It went on for 20 minutes. Every system checked and double-checked and verified. Outside, invisible to us sealed in our metal cocoon, the sun was rising over Texas, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. Tourists and space enthusiasts who'd heard about the launch were probably gathering at observation points miles away, cameras ready to capture another routine satellite launch. They had no idea they were about to witness something historic, the first crewed mission to the moon in over 50 years, even if they'd never know that's what it was. At T-minus 10 minutes, Kellerman's voice came through our comms. "Shepard 1, this is ground control. We are go for launch. Weather is nominal. All systems are green. Tracking stations are locked on. You are cleared for departure. Godspeed and bring it back safely." Rodriguez keyed her mic. "Copy that, ground control. Shepard 1 is go for launch." She switched to the internal channel, just the three of us. "All right, guys, this is it. In 10 minutes, we're either going to be on our way to the moon, or we're going to be scattered across the Texas desert in tiny pieces. Either way, it's been an honor training with you. Jake, Chen, whatever happens up there, we watch each other's backs. We're a crew, and crews don't leave each other behind. Understood?" "Understood," Chen said quietly. "Yeah," I said. "Understood." And then there was nothing to do but wait and count down the seconds and try not to think about everything that could go wrong. The countdown proceeded with mechanical precision. T-minus 5 minutes, and the rocket began making sounds, groans and creaks and hisses as it came to life. Thousands of systems activating in sequence. T-minus 3 minutes, and I felt the subtle vibration through my seat as fuel pumps spun up, pushing thousands of gallons of liquid oxygen and refined kerosene into combustion chambers. T-minus 1 minute, and the vibration became a rumble, the rocket becoming a living thing beneath us, barely contained power waiting to be released. T-minus 30 seconds. Rodriguez's hands moved over the controls, ready to take over manual if the computer screwed up. Chen's eyes were closed, lips moving in prayer again. I just breathed, in and out, counting my heartbeats, the way I used to before kicking down doors in Kandahar. T-minus 10. "Here we go," Rodriguez said, and I heard the tension in her voice despite her control. 9, 8, 7. I thought about Emma, hoped she'd be okay if I never came back. 6, 5, 4. I thought about the little girl in the pink dress, wondered if what we found on the moon would make her death mean something. 3, 2, 1. The world exploded. There's no other way to describe it. 1 second you're sitting still. The next second you're being crushed into your seat by a giant hand made of thrust and acceleration and pure violence. The rocket's engines ignited with a roar that you didn't just hear. You felt it in your bones, in your teeth, in your soul. We lifted off the pad, slow at first, almost gentle, then faster and faster as the engines built to full power. G-forces piled on, 2G, 3G, 4G, my vision tunneling, blood being forced away from my brain despite the compression suit's best efforts. I couldn't lift my arms, could barely breathe, every muscle in my body straining against the acceleration. Rodriguez was calling out numbers, altitude and velocity and trajectory, but I could barely process the words. All I knew was we were going up, punching through the atmosphere on a pillar of flame, leaving Earth behind at thousands of miles per hour. The ride was violent, shaking us like we were in a paint mixer, every rivet and weld in the rocket groaning under the stress. This was how people died in space. Not the elegant floating death of movies, but crushed or shaken apart or incinerated when something failed at the worst possible moment. But nothing failed. The first stage burned for 2.5 minutes that felt like hours, pushing us higher and faster until we'd burned through most of the fuel. Then separation. Explosive bolts fired. The empty first stage fell away, and for just a moment we were in freefall, weightless, my stomach trying to climb out through my throat. Then the second stage ignited and slammed me back into my seat. Another brutal acceleration. Another few minutes of being crushed by physics and engineering. Outside the small window next to my head, I caught a glimpse of Earth curving away below us, the atmosphere a thin blue line against the black of space. We'd made it. We were in space. We were actually doing this. The second stage burned out. Another separation. Then the third stage, the one built specifically for this mission, fired up for the trans-lunar injection burn. This one was longer, over 4 minutes of continuous thrust, pushing us out of Earth orbit and onto a trajectory that would carry us to the moon. When it finally cut off, the silence was deafening. We'd gone from the loudest experience of my life to complete, total quiet in the span of a heartbeat. Just the hiss of air circulation and the beeping of instruments and 3 people breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. "Holy shit," I said, because there weren't better words for it. "We're alive." Rodriguez laughed, high and slightly manic. Damn right we are. Shepherd 1, we have a clean separation and are on course for lunar intercept. 4 days to the moon, people. Hope you brought a good book. Chen unbuckled his harness and floated up out of his seat, spinning slowly in the zero gravity, his arms spread like wings. Thank you, God, he whispered. Thank you, thank you, thank you. He was crying, tears floating off his face in little spheres that drifted through the cabin like tiny planets. We made it. We're actually going to the moon. I looked out the window again, watched Earth shrinking behind us, becoming smaller and smaller until it was just another bright point in an infinite field of stars. Somewhere down there was Emma, my sister, going about her life with no idea her brother was hurtling through space toward an impossible destination. Somewhere down there were billions of people who had no idea what we were about to discover, no idea that everything they believed about reality was maybe about to change. And somewhere ahead of us, getting closer with every second that passed, was the moon. Cold, gray, airless and waiting with its secrets buried in ancient dust, its structure full of answers we weren't sure we wanted to find, its artifact that had driven the last crew to madness and death. 4 days, I said quietly, watching our home planet disappear into the distance. 4 days until we find out the truth. Rodriguez keyed her mic to ground control. Shepherd 1 to ground control. We are on course and all systems nominal. Trans-lunar injection successful. We are go for lunar approach. Kellerman's voice came back, distorted by distance but still clear enough. Copy that, Shepherd 1. You are go for mission continuation. Godspeed. And remember, bring it back. Whatever you find up there, bring it back. Rodriguez looked at me and Chen, something unreadable in her eyes. Yeah, she said softly, not keying the mic. That's what I'm afraid of. 4 days in space changes you in ways that are hard to explain to someone who's never left Earth. The first day, everything is wonder and terror. You're floating, actually floating, looking back at the only home humanity has ever known, shrinking to the size of a marble. You can see entire continents at once, watch storm systems swirl across oceans, see the thin line of atmosphere that's all that stands between 7 billion people and the cold death of space. It's beautiful and horrifying in equal measure. The second day, the wonder starts to fade and the reality sets in. You're in a metal can the size of a minivan, breathing recycled air, drinking recycled water that used to be your own sweat and urine, and you're traveling through an environment that will kill you in seconds if anything goes wrong. There's no going back, no emergency exits, no calling for help that can reach you in time to matter. You're committed, utterly and completely. The third day, you stop thinking about it so much. It becomes routine. You learn to sleep while floating, strapped loosely to a wall so you don't drift into equipment. You learn to eat freeze-dried food that all tastes vaguely the same regardless of what the package claims. You learn to use a toilet that's essentially a vacuum cleaner attached to a funnel, which is exactly as dignified as it sounds. And you learn to live with your crewmates in a space smaller than most bathrooms, with no privacy, no personal space, no escape from each other's company. Rodriguez handled it best. She was a pilot, used to long flights and cramped cockpits. Chen struggled more, got claustrophobic on day 2, had to do breathing exercises while floating in front of the small porthole, staring at the stars until he calmed down. And me? I was somewhere in between. The tight quarters didn't bother me. I'd lived in worse in Afghanistan, but the helplessness did. In combat, you could always do something, fight or run or improvise. Here, if something went wrong, you were just along for the ride until either the problem fixed itself or you died. That lack of control gnawed at me. On the 4th day, the moon went from being a bright disk in the distance to an actual place, a world with features and landmarks and terrible beauty. We'd been decelerating for the last 12 hours, firing the spacecraft's main engine in a braking burn that would capture us into lunar orbit. Rodriguez handled it perfectly, her hands steady on the controls as she corrected our trajectory with tiny thruster pulses, putting us exactly where we needed to be. "Capture burn successful," she announced as the engine cut off. "We are in lunar orbit, altitude 200 kilometers, inclination 78 degrees, beginning descent checklist for Leva 1. This was it. We'd been in the Shepherd 1 capsule for 4 days, but now we'd transferred to the lunar module, the Leva 1, which would take us down to the surface. Rodriguez and I would make the landing while Chen stayed in orbit, manning the Shepherd 1 and maintaining communications with Earth. It was the same setup Apollo had used, and for the same reason. You always kept someone in orbit as backup, Someone who could come get you if things went wrong on the surface. Assuming anything could be done if things went wrong, which at this distance from Earth was a generous assumption. We suited up in silence, the routine so practiced now that we could do it half asleep. Check the seals, verify the life support, test the communications, run through the pre-EVA checklist one item at a time. Chen helped us, double-checking everything with the methodical precision of someone who knew his friends' lives depended on getting it right. "You guys be careful down there," he said as I locked my helmet into place. "Whatever you find, whatever's in that structure, don't take any stupid risks. The artifact isn't worth dying for." Rodriguez, already sealed in her suit, turned to look at him. "Everything's worth dying for if it's important enough. That's why we're here." Chen's face fell. "That's not what I meant." "I know what you meant," Rodriguez said, her tone softening slightly. "And we'll be careful. But we didn't come 250,000 miles to turn back if things get scary. We're going to complete the mission. We're going to find out what happened to Miller and Kane, and we're going to bring that artifact home." She paused. "But yeah, we'll try not to die in the process." It wasn't much of a reassurance, but it was all we had. The transfer to the Leva 1 was awkward and nerve-wracking, floating through the narrow connecting tunnel, dragging equipment bags, trying not to snag our suits on anything sharp. But we made it, secured ourselves in the module's seats, and began the undocking sequence. "Shepard 1, this is Leva 1, Rodriguez called over the radio. "We are go for separation." "Copy that, Leva 1, Chen's voice came back, already sounding distant, even though he was only a few meters away. "You are clear for undocking. I'll be watching from up here. Try to make it look easy." Rodriguez fired the separation thrusters, and we drifted away from the Shepard 1, the larger spacecraft slowly receding as we began our descent. Through the window, I could see the lunar surface below us, gray and lifeless and alien. No atmosphere, no weather, no erosion except the slow grinding of micrometeoroid impacts and the occasional asteroid strike. Everything that had ever happened on the moon was still there, preserved perfectly, waiting, including whatever Apollo 18 had found 50 years ago. The descent took an hour, Rodriguez manually flying us down using a combination of automated systems and her own skill, burning the engines at precise intervals to kill our orbital velocity and drop us toward the coordinates. We were heading for the far side of the moon, the hemisphere that always faces away from Earth, where no human eye had ever looked directly until the space age. It was rougher than the near side, more heavily cratered, no large Maria, those smooth, dark plains that made up the face of the moon when you looked at it from Earth. This was the moon's hidden face, and it looked like it had been used for target practice by the universe for 4 billion years. "There," Rodriguez said, pointing through the window at something below us. 10 o'clock, about 3 kilometers. "You see it?" I looked where she indicated and felt my breath catch. Even from this altitude, even through the glare and the shadows, I could see it. Wreckage scattered across the lunar surface, pieces of metal glinting in the harsh sunlight where no metal should be, the remains of Apollo 18. "Jesus," I whispered. "They really were here." "Yeah," Rodriguez said quietly. "And they never left." She adjusted our descent vector, bringing us down in a relatively flat area about 500 meters from the wreckage. Too close, and we might damage something with our exhaust plume. Too far, and we'd waste time and life support walking. The final descent was tense. Rodriguez called out altitude and velocity. I monitored the fuel levels and the engine performance, both of us acutely aware that if something went wrong now, we'd just become more wreckage on the lunar surface. At 20 meters altitude, the automatic landing system took over, using radar and thrusters to find the flattest spot. At 5 meters, we could see dust beginning to blast away from our exhaust, creating an expanding circle of disturbed regolith. At 2 meters, Rodriguez took manual control back, not trusting the computer for the final touchdown. And then, with a gentle bump that I barely felt through the seat, we landed. We were on the moon. "Leva 1 to Shepard 1, we have touchdown," Rodriguez called, her voice shaking slightly despite her control. "Landing site is stable, all systems nominal. We are go for EVA." "Copy that, Leva 1, Chen's voice came back. "Congratulations, you two. You just made history. Again." He paused. "Be safe down there." "That's the plan," I said, already unstrapping from my seat. "Let's suit up and see what we came for." The pre-EVA checklist took another 30 minutes, verifying our suit seals, charging our backpack life support systems, checking our communications and biomedical monitors. making sure we had all the equipment we'd need. Tools, sample containers, cameras, emergency supplies, all of it secured to our suits or packed in carrying bags. Finally, we were ready. Rodriguez opened the hatch, swung it outward, no airlock on the lever one. We depressurized the entire cabin and looked down at the ladder that would take us to the surface. "You want to go first?" she asked. "Make a speech for posterity?" I thought about Neil Armstrong's famous words, that whole one small step thing. What would I say? What could I say that would capture this moment? "Nah," I said. "This isn't that kind of mission. Let's just get to work." I climbed down the ladder, 9 rungs in the light lunar gravity, and then I was standing on the bottom rung, one small step away from the surface. I could see my shadow stretched out before me, absolutely black in the airless environment, no atmosphere to scatter light and soften edges. Everything was either brilliant white in the sunlight or pitch black in shadow, no middle ground. I stepped off the ladder and felt the crunch of lunar regolith under my boot. 1/6 gravity, just like the simulators, but somehow more real, more visceral. I was standing on another world, a human being, 240,000 miles from home, standing on ground that had never felt footsteps before. Except it had, hadn't it? 50 years ago, 3 men had stood here, had walked this same gray dust, had found something that had changed everything for them. And then they died, or disappeared, and no one had come back until now. Rodriguez landed beside me, and for a moment we just stood there, 2 figures in high-tech suits on an ancient, airless plane, looking around at a landscape that hadn't changed in millions of years. "Which way?" I asked. Rodriguez checked the GPS unit on her wrist. Yes, we had GPS on the moon, satellites and everything, part of the infrastructure built for missions like this that officially didn't exist. She pointed toward a rise in the terrain about half a kilometer away. "Wreckage is that way. We should start there, see if we can find anything useful, and..." She paused, her voice dropping. "And see if we can find the crew." We started walking, or bouncing really, in that peculiar lunar gait that's somewhere between walking and hopping. The surface was more varied than I'd expected. Not just flat dust, but rocks and small craters and ripples where ancient impacts had thrown material around. Every step kicked up dust that arced in perfect parabolas before settling back down, no air resistance to slow it. It was beautiful in a stark, dead kind of way, beautiful and utterly hostile to life. After 10 minutes, we reached the first piece of wreckage, a solar panel, torn and twisted, half buried in dust. Then more pieces, scattered in a rough line that suggested an impact or explosion. Parts of the descent stage, recognizable by the engine bells and fuel tanks. A section of the crew cabin, ripped open like a tin can. And then, finally, the main wreckage, what was left of the Apollo 18 lunar module. It looked like something had torn it apart from the inside. Not an explosion, not an impact. The damage was wrong for that. The metal was twisted outward, panels bent and shredded, creating an opening in the side of the module that was maybe a meter across. Rodriguez and I approached carefully, neither of us speaking, both of us seeing the same thing and not wanting to acknowledge it. Whatever had made this hole, whatever had destroyed the module, it had come from inside. Something had broken out, not broken in. I shone my helmet light through the opening, illuminating the interior. It was a mess, equipment floating or wedged in corners, everything coated in a fine layer of dust that had seeped in over 50 years. And there, strapped into one of the seats, still in his spacesuit, was a body. "Oh God," Rodriguez whispered. "Miller or Kane?" "Can't tell," I said, moving closer, my light playing over the figure. The suit was old-style Apollo gear, white fabric and metal rings, American flag patch on the shoulder. The helmet visor was dark, covered in dust. I reached out, wiped the dust away with my gloved hand, and immediately wished I hadn't. The face inside was wrong. Not just dead, not just decomposed. Wrong. The skin was pulled back in what might have been a scream, or might have been something else. Eyes wide and staring at nothing, mouth open. But what made my stomach turn was the expression. It wasn't fear, it wasn't pain, it was awe. Like he'd seen something so overwhelming, so impossible, that his face had frozen in that moment of terrible revelation. "We need to check for identification," Rodriguez said, her voice professionally detached in that way people get when they're seeing something horrible and need to not think about it. I checked the suit's name tag, brushed away more dust. "Kane," I read. "Robert Kane, lunar module pilot." "So Miller made it out," Rodriguez said. "He's the one who—" She trailed off, not finishing the sentence. "The one who went into the structure. The one who found the artifact. The one who sent that final transmission about everything being real." We looked around the wreckage for another few minutes but found nothing else useful. No logs, no records, nothing that would tell us what had happened here. Whatever story this place had to tell, it was written in twisted metal and one dead astronaut with an expression of cosmic horror frozen on his face. "The structure," I said finally. "We need to find the structure." Rodriguez pulled up her GPS, checked our position against the coordinates from the Apollo 18 transmissions. 2.3 kilometers, bearing 0905. That way. She pointed toward a large crater in the distance, maybe 100 meters in diameter, its far wall rising up to block the horizon. Inside the crater, they went down into it and never came back. We started walking, leaving Kane behind in his metal tomb, leaving the wreckage of Apollo 18 to continue its slow decay under the unfiltered sun. With every step, the crater loomed larger, and with every step, I felt a growing sense of dread that had nothing to do with the environment and everything to do with what we were about to find. Because whatever had killed Kane, whatever had driven Miller to send that transmission about everything being real, whatever had been important enough to spend 50 years planning a return mission, it was waiting down there in that crater, waiting for us, just like it had waited for Apollo 18. And I had the terrible feeling that when we found it, we were going to wish we hadn't. But we kept walking anyway, because that's what we came for. That's what we'd signed up for, to find the truth, no matter how terrible it might be. Rodriguez must have been thinking the same thing, because after a few minutes of silence, she said quietly, over the private channel, "Jake, if I tell you to run, if something happens and I say to get back to the level 1, you run. You don't argue, you don't try to be a hero. You just run. Understood? Same goes for you," I said. "If this goes sideways, we both run. We don't leave crew behind, remember?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. We both knew that if things went bad down there in that crater, running might not be an option. We reached the crater rim and looked down into the shadowed interior. It was maybe 80 meters deep, the bottom lost in darkness that our helmet lights could barely penetrate. And there, on the far wall, partially excavated from the ancient regolith, I could see it, the structure. Even from this distance, even in the darkness, you could tell it wasn't natural. The angles were too precise, the surface too smooth, the geometry too perfect. It looked like someone had taken a piece of a building, something massive and ancient, and buried it in the lunar surface a very long time ago, and cut into that surface, clearly visible even from here, were symbols, writing, markings that suggested intelligence, purpose, meaning. Holy shit, I breathed. It's real. It's actually real. "Yeah," Rodriguez said, and I could hear the fear in her voice now, no longer hidden behind professionalism. "It's real. Question is, what the hell is it?" We started the descent into the crater, toward the structure, toward answers we weren't sure we wanted. And with every step down into that darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were descending into something far deeper and more dangerous than just a hole in the moon. We were descending into a truth that had been waiting here for thousands of years, waiting for someone to find it and carry it back to Earth. And that truth, whatever it was, had already killed at least 2 people. Maybe we'd be next. The descent into the crater took 20 minutes, moving carefully in the low gravity, testing each foothold before committing our weight. The slope was steep enough that one wrong move could send us tumbling down 80 meters of rock and regolith. And in 1/6 gravity, you'd have plenty of time to think about your mistake before you hit bottom. Our helmet lights swept across the crater walls as we descended, illuminating layers of lunar geology laid bare by whatever ancient impact had created this place. Billions of years of history exposed in bands of different colored rock and dust, a timeline written in stone that stretched back to when the moon was young and the solar system was still being born. But my eyes kept being drawn away from the natural beauty of the crater walls to the thing waiting at the bottom, the structure. Even from halfway down, even with limited light, you could tell it was wrong. Wrong in the way that made your brain itch, made you want to look away but unable to stop staring. The angles weren't quite right. The proportions were off in ways that were hard to articulate, but impossible to ignore. It was like looking at an optical illusion, something that your eyes could see but your brain couldn't quite process. And the symbols covering its surface seemed to shift and move in our lights, though that was probably just shadows, and the way the dust settled in the carved grooves. Probably, I hoped. We reached the crater floor and the structure loomed above us, maybe 15 meters tall and twice that wide, jutting out of the regolith like the tip of something much larger buried beneath. The surface was smooth, impossibly smooth for something that should have been bombarded by micrometeorites for God knows how long. No pitting, no scarring, no damage at all. Whatever material it was made from, it was harder than anything we had on Earth. Rodriguez approached first, reaching out with one gloved hand to touch the surface. "It's warm," she said, surprise in her voice. "Not hot, but definitely warmer than it should be. Everything on the moon is either freezing or boiling depending on sun exposure, but it's like room temperature." "That's impossible," I said, even as I reached out to confirm it for myself. She was right. Through the insulation of my glove, I could feel it. Warmth, subtle, but definitely there, like touching stone that had been sitting in the sun. Except we were in shadow, had been in shadow for millions of years based on the crater's orientation. This thing was generating its own heat, which meant it was active, still functioning, after how many thousands of years. "Look at this," Rodriguez said, moving her light across the symbols carved into the surface. They weren't random scratches or decorative elements. They were organized, systematic, clearly some form of writing or mathematical notation. And now that we were up close, I could see that some of them looked almost familiar. Not familiar, like I could read them, but familiar like I'd seen similar shapes before, in history books or museums or… "That's Hebrew," I said suddenly, recognizing a symbol that looked like an angular shape I'd seen in Chen's Bible. At least some of it is. Ancient Hebrew. Rodriguez leaned closer, her helmet light playing across the characters. "You're right. These are definitely Hebrew letters. Aleph, Bet, Gimel. I took a comparative religion course in college, learned the alphabet. But these others, these geometric shapes and mathematical symbols, I've never seen anything like them. It's like someone combined Hebrew writing with advanced mathematics," and she trailed off, moving her light to a different section. "Oh my God. What?" I asked, moving to where she stood. "What is it?" She pointed at a series of symbols arranged in a perfect circle, with lines radiating outward like a sun or a star. In the center was writing, Hebrew, I thought, and around the outside were what looked like astronomical symbols. Planets, maybe, or stars. "This is a star chart," Rodriguez said, her voice shaking slightly. "These symbols represent celestial bodies, constellations. And if I'm reading this right, this center section, this is Earth. They were mapping Earth from space. Whoever built this, whatever they were, they came here from somewhere else, and they were observing Earth." The implications hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just some ancient structure. This was a base, an outpost, a place where something not human had come to watch humanity, to document us, to record what we did, and they'd done it so long ago that they'd carved their records in Hebrew, a language that was ancient when Rome was young. How long had they been watching? How much had they seen? "We need to find a way inside," I said, forcing myself to focus on the mission. Standing here speculating wouldn't get us answers. There has to be an entrance. Miller and Kane got in somehow. We circled the visible portion of the structure, our light sweeping across every surface, looking for a door or a hatch or any kind of opening. It took us 15 minutes to find it, not because it was hidden, but because it was so obvious we kept overlooking it. A section of the wall that was slightly darker than the rest, a rectangular outline maybe 2 meters tall and 1 meter wide. No handle, no controls, no obvious mechanism, just a door-shaped section of wall. Rodriguez pressed her hand against it experimentally. Nothing happened. "Maybe it's voice-activated," I suggested, feeling ridiculous even as I said it. "Or maybe it responds to…" The wall slid open. Just like that, with no warning, no sound we could hear through the vacuum. It simply slid sideways into the structure and revealed an opening into darkness. We both jumped back, hands instinctively going to the tools on our belts. Not weapons. We hadn't brought any weapons. What would we even use them against? Before realizing that nothing was coming out. The doorway was just there, open and waiting, like it had been expecting us. "Did you do something?" I asked Rodriguez. "Touch something. Press something." "No," she said. I was thinking about wanting to get inside, and it opened. It read your mind. I don't know. Maybe it responds to electromagnetic fields from our suits. Maybe it's programmed to open for anyone who approaches. Maybe it's magic for all I know. The point is, it's open." She paused, then switched to the main channel. "Chen, you copy. Reading you loud and clear. Leva 1. Chen's voice came back from orbit. "What's your status?" "We found the structure," Rodriguez said. "It's definitely not natural, definitely not human-made. Covered in symbols, some of them appear to be ancient Hebrew, and we just found an entrance. It opened on its own. We're going to investigate." There was a long pause. Then Chen's voice came back, tighter than before. "Be careful. Miller and Kane went in, and only one came back out. And what came out with him killed Kane and destroyed their module. Maybe whatever's in there should stay in there." Rodriguez looked at me, and even through her helmet visor I could see the conflict in her eyes. Chen was right. This was dangerous, possibly suicidal. Every instinct screamed that we should get back to the Leva 1, return to orbit, report what we'd found, and let someone else make the decision about what to do next. But we hadn't come 250,000 miles to turn back at the threshold. "We're going in," Rodriguez said, "but we're staying in constant contact. If we stop transmitting, if you lose our signal, you return to Earth immediately. Don't come looking for us. Just go. Understood?" Chen's voice cracked. "I understand. God be with you." "Yeah," I said quietly. "Let's hope so." We stood at the threshold for a moment, our lights shining into the darkness beyond. The interior looked like a corridor, smooth walls extending back into the structure, no visible end. The same impossible material as the exterior, the same warmth radiating from it. And along the walls, more symbols, more writing, glowing faintly with some kind of phosphorescence that gave everything a ghostly blue-green cast. "Together?" Rodriguez asked. "Together," I confirmed. We stepped through the doorway. The moment we crossed the threshold, I felt it. A change in pressure. Subtle, but definitely there, like my ears trying to pop. My suit sensors went crazy for a second, showing a spike in external pressure that shouldn't be possible. There was no atmosphere on the moon. There was no air. But inside this structure, apparently, there was something. Not enough to breathe, not enough to hear sound, but enough to register on our instruments. Enough to suggest that this place had systems, power, functionality that shouldn't exist after sitting dormant for thousands of years. "You seeing this?" Rodriguez asked, checking her own sensors. "Partial pressure, 0.02 atmospheres, mostly nitrogen with traces of oxygen and argon. It's not enough to support life, but it's way more than the vacuum outside. This place is sealed, maintaining an atmosphere." "How?" I asked, but she just shook her head. How wasn't the question. The question was why. Why would an ancient structure on an airless moon still be maintaining an atmosphere after all this time? Unless it had never stopped. Unless whatever built this had designed it to run forever, waiting for someone to find it. The corridor extended about 20 meters before opening into a larger space. As we approached, lights began to activate. Not mechanical lights with bulbs and filaments, but sections of the wall itself beginning to glow, casting that same eerie blue-green illumination across everything. We emerged into a chamber that took my breath away. It was huge, maybe 50 meters across and twice that high, the ceiling lost in shadows above us. The walls were covered floor to ceiling in those symbols, millions of them, arranged in columns and rows that suggested organization, cataloging, some kind of systematic record-keeping. And hovering in the center of the chamber, suspended in mid-air with no visible support, rotating slowly, was a sphere about 3 meters in diameter. It looked like it was made of crystal or glass, but it wasn't transparent. It was full of swirling patterns, colors that shifted and changed, images that formed and dissolved too quickly to focus on. "What the hell is that?" I whispered. Rodriguez didn't answer. She was staring at the walls, her helmet light sweeping across the symbols. "Jake," she said finally, her voice barely audible, "these aren't just decorations. These are records, historical records. Look, these sections here have dates. At least, I think they're dates. Numbers in base 60, Sumerian style. And these images, these pictographs mixed in with the writing, they're showing events, battles, floods, cities being built." She moved closer to the wall, tracing one section with her finger. "This one shows a great flood, water covering everything. And here, these figures leading animals onto a boat. Jake, this is the story of Noah. They documented Noah's flood." I moved to where she stood, my light joining hers. She was right. The symbols were telling a story, one I recognized from Sunday school classes I'd attended as a kid before I stopped believing. A man, a boat, animals in pairs, water rising, the world drowning. But this wasn't a metaphorical story or a moral tale. This was a historical record, carved into an alien structure on the moon by something that had witnessed it happen. "Over here," I called, moving to another section of wall. "These symbols show people crossing water on dry ground. And here, this figure with arms raised, holding something, a staff maybe, and behind him, water rising up in walls on either side. The parting of the Red Sea. Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt. Another Bible story, rendered in alien symbols on a wall 250,000 miles from Earth. This couldn't be coincidence. This couldn't be anything except what it appeared to be. Proof that someone, something, had been watching Earth during biblical times, documenting the events described in ancient texts, recording them for what? For posterity? For study? For some purpose we couldn't begin to understand? Rodriguez had moved to yet another section, her voice coming through the comms tight with emotion I'd never heard from her before. This one shows the creation. 6 days of creation, each one marked with a different symbol. Light, sky, land, plants, animals, humans, and here on the 7th day, rest. It's all here, Jake. The entire book of Genesis, recorded on an alien structure. How is this possible? How could they know? Because they were there, I said, the truth settling over me like a weight. They witnessed it. They saw the creation of the world, saw the flood, saw Moses part the sea. They were observers, documenters, witnesses to everything our ancestors said happened. And they recorded it here, in this place, to preserve the truth. But who are they? Rodriguez asked, turning away from the wall to look at the floating sphere in the center of the chamber. What are they? Angels? Aliens? Some kind of cosmic archivists? I didn't have an answer. But as I stood there, in that impossible chamber full of ancient records proving that the Bible was literally true, I felt something I hadn't felt since before Afghanistan, before the little girl in the pink dress, before I'd convinced myself that the universe was empty and meaningless. I felt small, not in a bad way, not diminished or insignificant. Small in the way you feel when you look up at the night sky and really comprehend the scale of everything. Small in the way that reminds you that you're part of something much larger than yourself, something that's been unfolding for thousands of years and will continue long after you're gone. Small, but somehow also connected to it all, part of the story that these walls were telling. The artifact, I said, looking at the floating sphere. That's what we came for. That's what Miller and Kane found. That's what we're supposed to bring back. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Yeah, but Jake, look at it. It's hovering in mid-air. It's rotating on its own. It's full of moving images and colors. How do we even touch it? How do we know it won't kill us? Only one way to find out, I said, and started walking toward the center of the chamber. Jake, wait, Rodriguez called, but I was already moving, drawn to the sphere like it was calling to me. Maybe it was. Maybe that's how it worked, how it had worked on Miller and Kane. Maybe it wanted to be found, wanted to be touched, wanted to share whatever knowledge or truth or terrible revelation it contained. I reached out, my gloved hand extending toward the rotating sphere, and the moment my fingers made contact, the world exploded into light and I saw everything. I saw the beginning of everything. Darkness giving way to light at a spoken word. Energy and matter coalescing from nothing into something. I saw galaxies forming, stars igniting, planets cooling from molten rock into worlds that could support life. I saw Earth, young and violent, being shaped by forces beyond comprehension. And I saw them, the observers, the watchers, beings of light and purpose who had been created to document, to witness, to record, not to interfere, not to change, just to watch and remember. They had been there at the beginning, assigned to follow humanity's story, to document every triumph and tragedy, every moment of grace and horror. They had watched Adam and Eve in the garden, watched Cain kill Abel, watched Noah build his ark while the world mocked him. They had documented the Tower of Babel, the destruction of Sodom, Moses on the mountain receiving commandments written by a finger of fire. They had seen it all, recorded it all, preserved it all in their archives scattered across the solar system. And this structure, this place we were standing in, was one of those archives, a library of impossible truths. I saw the observer's nature, not quite angels, not quite aliens, something in between, something that didn't have a word in any human language. Creatures of duty and purpose, created to bear witness, to ensure that nothing was forgotten, that every word of the divine story was preserved exactly as it happened. They were the ultimate historians, the final arbiters of truth. And what they had documented proved beyond any doubt that the events described in the Bible had happened, not metaphorically, not as parables or moral lessons, but as actual historical events, witnessed and recorded by beings who had no reason to lie, no agenda except to preserve the truth. The flood had drowned the world, the Red Sea had parted, the walls of Jericho had fallen at a shout, plagues had struck Egypt, the dead had risen, all of it, every impossible miracle. Every event that I dismissed as myth or legend or primitive superstition, it had all happened exactly as written. And if it had all happened, if every word was true, then that meant God was real. Not the distant, indifferent universe I'd convinced myself existed, not the random chaos of matter and energy, but an actual, active, involved deity who had created everything, who had spoken worlds into existence, who had walked in gardens, and written on stone tablets and parted waters and raised the dead. God was real. And if God was real, then so was everything else. Judgment, salvation, damnation, heaven and hell. All of it real, all of it waiting, all of it true. The knowledge hit me like a physical blow and I stumbled backward, my hand losing contact with the sphere. I fell in the low gravity, landed hard on my back, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "Jake!" Rodriguez was there, kneeling beside me, her hands on my shoulders. "Jake, what happened? What did you see?" I couldn't answer, couldn't find words for what I'd just experienced. How do you explain to someone that you just witnessed the entire history of creation compressed into a few seconds? How do you tell them that everything they'd ever doubted was true? That the universe was infinitely more complex and purposeful and terrifying than anyone had imagined? "Everything," I finally managed to say. "I saw everything. Rodriguez, it's all true. Every word of the Bible, every story, every miracle, it all happened. The observers, they witnessed it all. They recorded it all. And if that's true, then God is real." Rodriguez finished, her voice barely a whisper. "And we're standing in a place that proves it." We stayed there for a long moment, two humans on an alien moon, confronted with a truth that changed everything. And I realized that this was what had driven Miller to send that final transmission. This was what had killed Cain, or driven him mad, or whatever had happened to him. The weight of absolute knowledge, the terrible burden of knowing with complete certainty that the universe had a creator, and that creator was watching, and that every choice mattered in ways we couldn't begin to comprehend. It was too much, too big, too overwhelming for a human mind to process without breaking. But we hadn't broken, not yet. And we had a mission to complete. "We need to take it," I said, climbing back to my feet. "The artifact. We need to bring it back to Earth." Rodriguez looked at the floating sphere, still rotating peacefully in the center of the chamber, full of knowledge that could save humanity or destroy it or both. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Are you sure the world is ready for this?" I thought about Chen in orbit above us, about Kellerman and the shadow organization that had sent us here, about the billions of people on Earth going about their lives with no idea what we'd found. Were they ready? Would they ever be ready? "No," I said honestly, "but that's not our decision to make. We came here to recover the artifact, so let's recover it and let someone else figure out what to do with it." I just hoped we'd all survive the consequences. Rodriguez and I stood before the floating sphere for what felt like an eternity, both of us trying to work up the courage to touch it again. I'd made contact once and it had shown me the entire history of creation in the span of a few seconds. What would happen if I held on to it longer? What other truths were buried in that crystalline surface, waiting to flood into whoever was foolish enough to make contact? "We need a plan," Rodriguez said finally, her voice steady despite what we'd just witnessed. "We can't just grab it and run. Look at it. It's hovering in midair with no visible support. For all we know, moving it could trigger some kind of defense mechanism, or cause the whole structure to collapse, or..." She trailed off, running through worst-case scenarios the way pilots do. "Or it could just be sitting there waiting for someone to pick it up," I said. "Miller and Cain got it out somehow. They made it back to their module with it, or at least Miller did. If they could move it, so can we. And look how that turned out for them," Rodriguez countered. "Cain dead in the module with that expression on his face. Miller disappeared. Their whole mission scrubbed from history. Maybe there's a reason they don't want this thing on Earth." She had a point. Everything about this felt wrong, felt dangerous, felt like we were tampering with something that should be left alone. But we'd signed on for this mission knowing the risks. We'd spent 8 months training. We'd traveled 250,000 miles. We couldn't turn back now, not when we were this close to completing the objective. "Chen," I called over the comms. "You still reading us?" Loud and clear, his voice came back, slightly distorted by distance and the mass of the moon between us, but still audible. "I've been monitoring your vitals. Jake, your heart rate spiked to 190 when you touched that thing. What happened?" I paused, trying to find words that wouldn't sound insane. "I saw proof, Chen. Proof of everything you believe. Everything in the Bible. It all happened. The observers, these beings who built this place, they documented it all. They were there, watching, recording, and it's all stored in this artifact." There was a long silence from orbit. Then Chen's voice came back, shaking with emotion. "The creation? The flood? All of it?" "All of it," I confirmed. "Every word, every miracle, every impossible event. They witnessed it and recorded it. This artifact is essentially a historical database of divine intervention. And Chen, if this gets back to Earth, if people see what's in here, it changes everything. Every atheist, every skeptic, every person who's ever doubted, they'd have to face absolute proof that God is real." Another long pause. "Then you have to bring it back," Chen said firmly. "Whatever the risk, whatever the danger, you have to bring it back. The world needs to know the truth. People need to know that they're not alone, that there's meaning and purpose, that everything matters. Jake, this is why we're here. This is what we were always meant to find." Rodriguez looked at me, and I could see the conflict in her eyes even through the helmet visor. Chen was right that people deserve the truth, but I could also see her thinking about what that truth would do, the chaos it would cause, the institutions it would topple, the wars it might start between those who believed and those who refused to believe even in the face of evidence. Sometimes the truth was a weapon, and we were about to hand that weapon to people who might use it to destroy each other. "All right," I said, making the decision. "We're bringing it back, but we do this carefully, methodically. Rodriguez, you record everything, every angle, every symbol on these walls, everything. We document this entire chamber, so even if something goes wrong, we have proof of what we found. I'll figure out how to extract the artifact." She nodded and began moving around the chamber, her suit cameras capturing everything. I approached the floating sphere again, more cautiously this time, studying it without touching. Up close, I could see that it wasn't perfectly smooth. There were seams in the crystal, junction points where different sections came together, like it had been assembled from multiple pieces. And at the bottom, where the sphere came to a point, there was a symbol carved into the surface. Hebrew again, letters I didn't recognize, but that looked ancient, formal, important. Something about the way the sphere floated suggested it wasn't defying gravity through some kind of anti-gravity technology. It looked more like it was being held in place by magnetic fields or some other force we couldn't see, which meant there might be a way to deactivate whatever was holding it. Let us take it freely. I examined the pedestal beneath the sphere, or rather, the empty space where a pedestal should be. The sphere was hovering about a meter off the floor, and directly below it was a circular pattern carved into the ground. More symbols, arranged in a ring, with lines radiating outward to form a geometric pattern that hurt to look at too long. Mathematics beyond anything I'd learned, equations written in a language that predated human civilization. "I think this is a control mechanism," I called to Rodriguez. "These symbols on the floor, they're maintaining the field that's holding the artifact in place. If we can deactivate it, the sphere should drop and we can grab it. Or it could fall and shatter," Rodriguez pointed out, "releasing whatever energy or information is stored inside in an uncontrolled burst that fries our brains or worse. You sure you want to risk that?" No, I wasn't sure. But what choice did we have? We couldn't just leave it here. "There has to be a way to do this safely," I said, kneeling down to examine the symbols more closely. The observers, whoever they were, they built this place to preserve knowledge. They wouldn't have made it impossible to access. They wanted it to be found. They wanted it to be taken and shared. So there must be a way to... The symbols began to glow. Not all of them. Just a sequence of 5 symbols arranged in a pattern that my eyes followed almost unconsciously. A triangle, a circle, 3 lines, a star, and something that looked like the Hebrew letter Shin. As I watched, they pulsed with that same blue-green light, growing brighter and brighter until I had to look away. And then, with no sound we could hear through the vacuum, the sphere began to descend. Slowly, gracefully, lowering itself toward the floor like it was being gently placed by invisible hands. It settled onto the carved circle with a soft impact I felt through my boots, and the glow from the symbols faded. The sphere sat there, inert and waiting, no longer rotating, no longer displaying those swirling images, just a crystal sphere about a meter in diameter, sitting on the floor of an alien structure, containing proof that would reshape human understanding of reality itself. "Did you do something?" Rodriguez asked, moving closer. I don't think so," I said. "I was just looking at the symbols, and they activated on their own. Like the door earlier. Like this place responds to intent or observation or something we don't understand. Or like it was programmed to release the artifact to whoever came looking for it," Rodriguez said quietly. "Like this was always meant to be found and taken. Like the observers wanted us to have it." That thought should have been comforting. Instead, it was terrifying. Because if they wanted us to have it, if this was all part of some grand design, then what else had they planned? What other surprises were waiting for us? I reached out slowly, giving my rational mind one last chance to scream that this was a bad idea, and place both hands on the sphere. The moment I made contact, the visions came again, but different this time, more controlled, like the artifact was allowing me to browse, rather than forcing everything into my consciousness at once. I saw the observers more clearly now, understood their nature better. They weren't physical beings, not really. They were something between energy and consciousness, given form and purpose by the same power that had created everything else. They existed outside normal time, could move through history as easily as we moved through space, witnessing events as they unfolded across millennia. Their mission was simple: observe and record, never interfere, never change, never influence, just watch and document so that nothing would be lost. So that truth would always exist somewhere even if it was forgotten or denied everywhere else. They had built structures like this one throughout the solar system, on Mars, on Europa, in the asteroid belt, even in deep craters on Earth that no human had ever explored. Each one a library, an archive, a repository of absolute truth. And this artifact I was holding was the key to all of them. A database that could access every record, every witness statement, every moment of divine intervention that had ever occurred. I saw what had happened to Miller and Kane. They had found the artifact, had touched it just as I had seen the truth. But unlike me, who had been prepared by 8 months of training and had some psychological framework to process the impossible, they had gone in cold. They had been 1970s astronauts, products of the space race, trained for mechanical failures and engineering problems, not for existential revelations. The knowledge had overwhelmed them. Kane had retreated into catatonic shock, his mind shutting down to protect itself from truth it couldn't process. Miller had tried to get them both back to the module, had succeeded in getting Kane secured in his seat, but the damage was done. When Miller tried to lift off, to bring the artifact back to Earth, something had stopped him. Not the observers, they were beyond such things, but some safety protocol built into the structure itself. The artifact couldn't leave the moon until humanity was ready for it. Until someone came who could handle the truth without breaking, who could carry it back and deliver it intact both physically and mentally. And apparently, I was that someone, or at least, the observers thought I might be. Miller had ultimately abandoned the mission, had walked back into the structure, had sat down in a corner and simply waited to die rather than face a world that wasn't ready for what he'd learned. His body was probably still here somewhere, mummified in the airless environment. Another casualty of truth too terrible to bear. But we wouldn't make the same mistake. We had Chen, who already believed and would be strengthened by the proof. We had Rodriguez, who was mentally strong enough to compartmentalize and focus on the mission. And we had me, who'd already seen the worst humanity could do to itself and had somehow survived with enough sanity intact to function. Together, maybe we could do what Miller and Kane couldn't. I pulled my hands away from the sphere, the visions fading, leaving me standing in the chamber with my heart racing and my mind reeling but still intact, still functional, still sane, or at least sane enough. "We can move it," I said to Rodriguez. "It's safe now. The observers released it. They want us to take it." "You're sure?" she asked. "I'm not sure about anything anymore," I admitted, "but I know we have to try. Help me get this into the sample container." We'd brought a specialized container designed to hold geological samples, lined with shock-absorbing foam and radiation shielding. It wasn't designed for alien artifacts, but it would have to do. Together, we carefully lifted the sphere. It was heavy, maybe 50 kilos, dense beyond what crystal should be, and settled it into the container. The moment we sealed it, I felt a sense of loss, like cutting off a connection I hadn't realized was there. The artifact was dormant now, inert, waiting to be awakened again by whoever opened the container on Earth. "We've got it," Rodriguez called over the comms to Chen. "Artifact is secured. We're heading back to the level 1. "Thank God," Chen's voice came back, relief evident even through the static. "How long until you're back at the module?" 30 minutes, Rodriguez estimated, checking her suit chronometer. "Maybe 40 with the extra weight. Life support is still good. We have plenty of margin." "Copy that," Chen said. "I'll prep for rendezvous once you're back in orbit. Just be careful bringing that thing up here. Based on what you've told me, I'm not sure I want to be in an enclosed space with it." "Don't worry," I said, looking at the sealed container. "It's dormant now, sleeping. It won't show you anything unless you ask it to." I hoped that was true. We took one last look around the chamber, at the walls covered in impossible history, at the records of miracles and divine intervention that proved beyond doubt that the universe was not what we thought it was. Rodriguez's cameras had captured it all, but I knew that video footage wouldn't convey the truth the way being here did, feeling the weight of it, understanding that we were standing in a place that bridged the gap between faith and knowledge. "We should go," Rodriguez said quietly, "before I start thinking too hard about what we're doing and change my mind." We carried the container between us, retracing our steps through the corridor toward the entrance. The lights faded behind us as we walked, the structure powering down now that its purpose had been fulfilled. At the threshold, I paused and looked back one last time. In the darkness, I could have sworn I saw something, a shimmer in the air, a presence, maybe the observers themselves watching us go. Or maybe just my imagination, my mind trying to process the impossible by inventing explanations. "Thank you," I whispered, not sure who or what I was thanking, but feeling like it needed to be said. And then we stepped out into the lunar surface, into the harsh reality of vacuum and radiation and cold, carrying proof that would change everything. If we made it home, if we survived the journey, if the artifact let us survive, that was the question that nagged at me as we climbed back up out of the crater, the container heavy between us. The observers had let us take it, had practically given it to us. But was that because they wanted humanity to have the truth? Or because they knew what that truth would do to us, and they wanted to watch what happened next? After all, they were observers, witnesses, documenters of history, and maybe, just maybe, we were about to give them the most interesting piece of history to document yet. The moment when humanity learned the truth and either rose to embrace it or tore itself apart, trying to deny it. Either way, it would be quite a show, and the observers, in their structures scattered across the solar system, would be watching. The climb back up the crater wall was brutal. Between the awkward weight of the container and the need to be careful not to damage it, what should have taken 20 minutes stretched to almost an hour. Rodriguez and I took turns carrying it, one person climbing while the other secured the container and passed it up, then the second person following. My muscles burned despite the low gravity, and my suit's cooling system was working overtime to keep me from overheating. But we made it. We reached the rim of the crater and started the long walk back to the level 1. The lander a distant glint of metal in the harsh sunlight about 2 kilometers away. The lunar surface that had seemed so alien and fascinating on our way here now just felt hostile, like we'd overstayed our welcome, and the moon itself wanted us gone. Maybe it did. Maybe we'd taken something that was never meant to leave this place, despite what the observers had programmed into their structure. "Jake," Rodriguez said suddenly, her voice tight. "Stop. Don't move." I froze mid-step, my boot hovering centimeters above the regolith. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Your bio readings just spiked," she said. "Heart rate, blood pressure, brain activity, everything just jumped like you're having a panic attack. But you seem calm. Are you feeling okay?" I took stock of myself. Breathing was normal. No chest pain, no dizziness, no sense of panic or fear. I felt fine, physically. "I'm good," I said. "Maybe just the exertion catching up with me?" "Maybe," Rodriguez said, but she didn't sound convinced. "Let's keep moving. The sooner we're off this rock, the happier I'll be." We continued walking, but something felt different now. Wrong, somehow, though I couldn't articulate what had changed. The landscape looked the same. The earth still hung in the sky in the same position. Our footprints still marked the path we'd taken earlier. But there was a sensation like being watched, like something was paying attention to us that hadn't been before. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just psychological reaction to everything we'd witnessed in the structure. Of course, I felt paranoid after seeing proof that beings had been observing Earth for thousands of years. Of course, I felt like I was being watched. I just spent the last hour in a place built specifically for watching and recording. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each step. And then Chen's voice crackled over the comms, panicked in a way I'd never heard from him before. "Jake, Rodriguez, you need to get back to the lander now. I'm seeing something on thermal imaging, something moving on the surface near your position. It wasn't there before. It just appeared, like it came out of the crater after you left, and it's following your tracks." My blood went cold. What kind of something? Another astronaut? Equipment from Apollo 18? "I don't know," Chen said, his voice rising. "It's not showing up clearly. The thermal signature is wrong. Too hot in some places, too cold in others. It's like nothing I've ever seen, but it's definitely moving, and it's definitely headed your way. You're about 30 seconds ahead of it. Maybe less." "Run!" Rodriguez and I looked at each other for a split second, then broke into the fastest movement we could manage in the lunar gravity, a bounding lope that covered ground quickly but felt agonizingly slow compared to the urgency pumping through my veins. The container banged between us, threatening to throw off our rhythm, but we couldn't afford to drop it, not after everything we'd been through to get it. "Chen, what's it doing?" Rodriguez gasped between bounds. "Still following you," Chen said, his voice tight with fear. "It's fast, really fast. Faster than you're moving. It's going to catch you before you reach the lander. Jake, Rodriguez, you need to drop the container and run. Leave the artifact. Save yourselves." "No," I shouted, surprising myself with the vehemence. "We didn't come all this way to abandon the mission now. We're not leaving it." "Then you're going to die," Chen said flatly. "Whatever that thing is, it's 20 meters behind you and closing. 15 meters. 10. "The lander!" Rodriguez shouted. "Straight ahead, we're almost there." I could see it now, the Leva 1 standing on its 4 legs like a mechanical insect, the ladder leading up to the hatch that represented safety and escape. We were maybe 100 meters away, so close, but not close enough. I felt it before I saw it, a presence behind us, close enough that some primitive part of my brain was screaming danger, even though there was no sound, no breath, no footsteps in the vacuum. I made the mistake of looking back over my shoulder. There was something there, not a person. Not exactly. It was roughly humanoid in shape, maybe 2 meters tall, but the proportions were wrong. Arms too long, legs that bent in ways that human legs shouldn't bend. And instead of a spacesuit or skin, it seemed to be made of the same material as the structure we'd just left. That impossible smooth substance that was somehow both solid and shifting, somehow both there and not there. Where it walked, it left no footprints. Where it moved, the air, what little air my suit could detect, rippled like heat haze. And worst of all, where its face should have been, there were symbols. The same Hebrew characters we'd seen carved into the structure, but these were moving, rearranging themselves, forming words I couldn't read but somehow understood at a level deeper than language. It was a guardian, a watcher, one of the observers, but not in their usual form. This was their physical manifestation, the shape they took when observation wasn't enough, when they needed to interact with the material world, and it was coming for the artifact. "Don't look at it," Rodriguez screamed. "Don't make eye contact. Just run." But I couldn't look away. The symbols on its face were hypnotic, compelling, pulling at my consciousness the same way the artifact had. And as I stared, I began to understand what they were saying. Words without sound, meaning without language. A message transmitted directly into my mind. The artifact must not leave. Humanity is not ready. You do not understand what you carry. You do not comprehend what you would unleash upon your world. Give it back. Return it to the chamber. Walk away while you still can. "Jake!" Rodriguez yanked on my arm, pulling me forward, breaking the connection. "Whatever it's doing, don't listen. Keep moving." We bounded the last 50 meters to the lander with the Guardian right behind us. So close I could feel something like heat radiating from it even through my suit. Rodriguez reached the ladder first, practically throwing herself up the rungs. I was right behind her, the container clutched awkwardly under one arm, my other hand grabbing at the ladder. I got one boot on the bottom rung when I felt something grab my ankle. Not a hand, not exactly. More like a force, a pressure, an irresistible pull trying to drag me back down. I looked down and saw the Guardian had reached out, its too long arm extending, fingers made of light and mathematics wrapping around my leg. The symbols on its face were flashing rapidly now, the message urgent, desperate. You do not understand. The knowledge will destroy you. Faith and knowledge cannot coexist. One must die for the other to survive. If you bring proof back to Earth, you will kill faith. And without faith, humanity will have nothing left to save it from itself. I kicked out reflexively, my boot passing through the Guardian's hand like it was made of smoke. The pressure released and I scrambled up the ladder, Rodriguez pulling me into the lander from above. The moment I cleared the hatch, she slammed it shut and started the emergency pressurization sequence. "Chen, we're in!" she shouted into the comms. "Fire us up! Get us off this surface now!" "Already prepped," Chen's voice came back. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. The engine ignited beneath us with a roar I felt more than heard, and the lever 1 lifted off in a cloud of dust and exhaust. Through the small window I caught one last glimpse of the Guardian standing on the surface, its arms still raised, symbols still flashing their warning. And then we were rising, accelerating, putting distance between us and the surface, between us and that impossible being, between us and the truth we'd disturbed. "Is it following us?" I asked, checking every window, expecting to see it somehow pursuing us into space. "Negative," Chen said. "Thermal signature disappeared the moment you lifted off. Whatever it was, it's gone. Or at least, it's not showing up on sensors anymore." Rodriguez was shaking, her hands moving over the controls more by muscle memory than conscious thought. What the hell was that? That wasn't human, wasn't any kind of technology we know about. It was like it was made of the same stuff as the structure, like a piece of the building came to life and tried to stop us. "It was an observer," I said, still trying to process what I'd seen, what it had tried to tell me. "A Guardian, specifically. The observers aren't just archivists, they're also protectors. They don't just record truth, they decide when humanity is ready for it. And apparently they don't think we're ready for this." I gestured to the container strapped down in the cargo area, the artifact inside silent and dark, but somehow still present, still waiting. "Did it hurt you?" Rodriguez asked, her eyes scanning me for damage. "Did it do anything when it grabbed you?" I looked down at my ankle where the Guardian had made contact. The suit showed no damage, no breach, no indication that anything had touched me, but I could still feel it. Not pain exactly, but a sensation like a brand, like something had been marked or changed at a level deeper than physical. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just scared the hell out of me. Let's just get to orbit and dock with the Shepherd 1. I want to be as far away from this moon as possible." The ascent continued smoothly, our trajectory calculated perfectly to intercept Chen's orbit. As we rose higher and higher, Earth came into view through the window, blue and white and beautiful, so different from the gray desolation of the moon. Home. We were going home, with proof that would change everything. The docking with Shepherd 1 was textbook perfect, Rodriguez's skill and Chen's preparation combining to make it look easy. We transferred back into the main capsule, securing the artifact container in a specially prepared compartment, and then jettisoned the Leva 1 to reduce mass for the return journey. The lunar module tumbled away into space, empty now, its purpose fulfilled. "Trans-Earth injection burn in 5 minutes, Chen announced, his hands moving over controls, while his eyes kept darting to the container holding the artifact. "Everything's ready, all systems nominal, we're going home." But he said it like he wasn't sure that was a good thing. I floated over to where he sat, put a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" He looked up at me, and I saw fear in his eyes that I'd never seen before. "Jake, you said the artifact proves everything in the Bible is true. The creation, the miracles, all of it. That should make me happy. That's what I've believed my whole life." But he trailed off, struggling with something. "But?" I prompted. "But if it proves all the good things are true, then it proves all the terrible things are true too," he said quietly. "The flood that drowned the world, the destruction of Sodom, the plagues, the massacres, the divine judgment. All the parts of the Bible that I've always tried to rationalize or contextualize or explain away as metaphor, they all happened exactly as written. God didn't just create life, he also destroyed it, repeatedly. Whenever humanity disappointed him." Chen's hands were shaking now. "And if that's all true, if God is real and actively judging us, then we're in trouble, Jake. Because humanity hasn't exactly been living up to divine standards. We've been operating under the assumption that there's no cosmic judgment, that we only answer to each other. But if that artifact gets back to Earth, if people see the proof, They'll know they're being watched. They'll know they're being judged. And they'll know that judgment is real and terrible and inevitable. The implications of his words settled over me like a weight. He was right. We'd been so focused on the wonder of discovery, on the amazing proof of divine existence, that we hadn't fully thought through what that proof meant. Not just that God existed, but that he was active, involved, judging. That prayer wasn't just talking to yourself, but actual communication with a being who could and would respond. That sin wasn't just a social construct, but a real violation of cosmic law with real consequences. That death wasn't the end, but just a transition to whatever came next. Heaven or hell, reward or punishment, based on how you'd lived your life. Maybe that's a good thing, I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. Maybe people need to know. Maybe if everyone understood that their actions matter, that there are real consequences, they'd make better choices. Maybe this is exactly what humanity needs. Proof that we're not alone, that we matter, that there's meaning and purpose to everything. Or maybe it'll start the worst religious wars in human history, Rodriguez interjected from where she floated nearby. Every religion claiming that this proves they were right all along. Every sect interpreting the artifact's revelations to support their own dogma. Every government trying to control or suppress or weaponize the information. Jake, we're bringing back proof of God. Do you have any idea how many people are going to kill each other over that? I didn't have an answer, because she was right. We'd seen the Guardian's warning. Knowledge and faith can't coexist. If you have proof, you don't need faith. And without the need for faith, without the doubt and the struggle and the personal journey to belief, what happens to religion? What happens to billions of people whose entire identity is built around faith in things unseen? We'd be destroying the very foundation of their spiritual lives, replacing mystery with certainty, replacing faith with knowledge. And that Guardian had been terrified of what that would do to humanity. Trans-Earth injection in 30 seconds, Chen said, his voice hollow. After this burn, we're committed. 4 days back to Earth. 4 days to decide what we're going to do with what we found. What do you mean, decide? Rodriguez asked sharply. The decision's already made. We have our orders. We bring it back. We turn it over to Kellerman and his people, and we let them figure out what to do with it. That's the mission. Is it? Chen challenged. Or is the mission to do what's right? What if the right thing is to leave the artifact in orbit, or send it into the sun? What if bringing it to Earth is the worst mistake we could possibly make? The computer started counting down. 10 seconds. We had 10 seconds to decide whether to proceed with the burn that would take us home, or to abort, to stay in lunar orbit, to figure out what the hell we were supposed to do with proof that could save humanity, or destroy it. 5 seconds, Chen said. Jake, Rodriguez, this is your last chance. Do we go home, or do we stay here and think this through? I looked at the container holding the artifact. I thought about the little girl in the pink dress, about all the death and meaninglessness I'd seen, about how desperately I'd wanted to believe that it all meant something. And now I had proof that it did mean something, that every life mattered, that nothing was wasted. How could we not share that? But I also thought about the Guardian's warning, about faith dying when confronted with certainty, about what happens to humanity when we lose the ability to doubt, to question, to choose to believe despite not knowing. Fire the burn, I said. We're going home. The engine ignited, pushing us out of lunar orbit and onto a trajectory back to Earth. For better or worse, the decision was made. We were bringing back proof of God. And whatever happened next, war or peace, enlightenment or chaos, salvation or destruction, it would be on us, the three people who'd been given a choice and had chosen to let humanity face the truth, ready or not. As Earth grew larger in our window and the moon shrank behind us, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd just made a terrible mistake, that the Guardian had been right to try to stop us, that some truths were too dangerous to know, but it was too late now. The artifact was coming to Earth, and God himself was watching to see what we'd do with it. The 4-day journey back to Earth was the longest 4 days of my life. Not because of physical hardship, we had plenty of supplies, the spacecraft was functioning perfectly, and the flight plan was proceeding exactly as designed. No, it was long because of the silence. The three of us barely spoke except when necessary for operations. We'd float in our small capsule, each lost in our own thoughts, occasionally glancing at the container holding the artifact like it was a bomb waiting to go off, which in a way it was. A bomb that would detonate not in fire and shrapnel, but in truth and revelation, and the complete restructuring of human understanding. On the second day, Chen tried to open a discussion about what we should do when we got back. Should we tell Kellerman everything we'd seen? Should we recommend that the artifact be studied carefully, released slowly, prepared properly before being shown to the world? Or should we argue that it needed to be revealed immediately, that humanity deserved the truth without delay or filtering? But the conversation died quickly. Rodriguez shut it down, saying that speculation was pointless. We had our orders, and we'd follow them. What happened after we turned over the artifact wasn't our decision to make. Chen had retreated into prayer after that, floating in front of one of the small portholes with his Bible, reading passages and whispering to himself. I caught fragments of what he was saying, verses about revelation and judgment, about the end times, about trumpets and seals and the unveiling of divine truth. He was preparing himself, I realized. Preparing for what he believed was coming, not just the revelation of the artifact's contents, but the beginning of something much larger. The end times, capital E, capital T. The final chapters of human history playing out exactly as prophesied. I wanted to tell him he was being dramatic, that one alien artifact wasn't going to trigger the apocalypse, but I couldn't, because I'd touched that thing. I'd seen what was inside it. And if that knowledge got out, if billions of people suddenly had absolute proof that every word of Revelation was literally true, that the judgments and plagues and cosmic battles were all waiting in humanity's future, yeah, that might just trigger the end of the world. Or at least, the end of the world as we knew it. Rodriguez spent most of her time checking and rechecking our trajectory, running calculations, monitoring systems, doing anything to keep her mind occupied. But I noticed she never looked at the artifact container if she could help it, and when she thought no one was watching, her hand would drift to the cross she wore on a chain around her neck, something I hadn't even known she had until we were in zero gravity and it floated free from her shirt. She'd been raised Catholic, I remembered from her file. Lapsed, not practicing, but still carrying that symbol, still holding on to something, even if she wouldn't admit it. On the third day, I woke up from a restless sleep to find Chen floating in front of the artifact container, his hand pressed against the sealed lid, his eyes closed. "Chen," I called softly, not wanting to startle him. "What are you doing?" His eyes opened, and there were tears floating away from his face in small spheres. "I can feel it, Jake. Even through the container, even with it dormant, I can feel the truth radiating from it. It's calling to me, showing me glimpses of what's inside. The creation, Jake. I saw the creation. I saw the moment when God spoke and light burst forth from nothing. I saw the void become form, chaos become order, emptiness become fullness. It was, he couldn't finish, overcome with emotion. I pulled him away from the container gently, guided him to the other side of the capsule. "Don't touch it, Chen. We don't know what prolonged exposure might do. The Guardian warned us about knowledge destroying faith." "You don't want to lose your faith by drowning it in certainty." "But I want to understand," Chen said desperately. "I've spent my whole life believing, hoping, having faith in things I couldn't prove. And now proof is right there, just a few centimeters away. And you're telling me not to look? How can I not look?" "Because maybe the Guardian was right," I said quietly. "Maybe faith and knowledge can't exist together. Maybe the struggle to believe, the choice to have faith despite doubt, maybe that's the whole point. Maybe that's what makes it meaningful. If you can prove God exists, then believing in God becomes as mundane as believing in gravity. It's not faith anymore, it's just acknowledgement of fact." Chen stared at me like I'd slapped him. "That's what you took from all this? We have proof that God is real, that every miracle actually happened, that humanity isn't alone in an empty universe. And you think we should hide it? Keep people in ignorance because faith needs doubt or some philosophical nonsense?" "I'm not saying we should hide it," I said. "I'm saying we should think very carefully about what we do with it. Because this isn't just information, Chen. This is a weapon, the most powerful weapon that's ever existed. Proof of God could unite humanity or tear it apart. It could bring peace or start wars. It could elevate us or destroy us, and we're the ones bringing it home. Then maybe we shouldn't," Rodriguez said from across the capsule, startling both of us. We'd thought she was asleep. She turned to face us, her expression harder than I'd ever seen it. "Maybe we should do what the Guardian wanted. Turn this ship around, take the artifact back to the moon, return it to the chamber where it belongs. Let it stay a mystery. Let people keep their faith because they choose to believe, not because they've been forced to acknowledge an uncomfortable truth." "That's insane," Chen said flatly. "We came all this way. risked everything, and you want to just give up, turn back, pretend we never found it. I want to protect humanity from itself, Rodriguez shot back. You think the world's ready for this? Look at us. 3 educated, trained, supposedly rational people, and we can barely handle what we've seen. We're falling apart, arguing, second-guessing everything. What do you think will happen when this gets released to 7 billion people who aren't prepared, who haven't spent 8 months training, who don't have the psychological framework to process proof of divine existence? She had a point, a good point. We were barely holding it together, and we'd been selected specifically because we were supposed to be stable, resilient, capable of handling extreme situations. What would this do to the average person? What would it do to society? We can't turn back, I said finally, breaking the tense silence. Even if we wanted to, we don't have the fuel or the life support. We're committed to this trajectory. In 36 hours, we're going to hit Earth's atmosphere and land in the recovery zone, and Kellerman and his people are going to be waiting for us. The decision of what to do with the artifact isn't ours to make anymore. It was made the moment we fired that trans-Earth injection burn. Then we destroy it, Rodriguez said, her voice cold and determined. Right now, before we get back. We open the container, we smash the artifact. We scatter the pieces in space. No evidence, no proof, just our word about what we found. And without physical proof, they can dismiss us as crazy, discredit our story, make it all go away. Chen's face went white. You can't be serious. Destroy proof of God's existence? That's blasphemy. That's the worst sin imaginable. Is it? Rodriguez challenged. Is it worse than bringing home something that will cause wars and death and chaos? Is it worse than destroying people's faith by replacing it with knowledge? Is it worse than potentially triggering the end of the world because humanity can't handle the truth? They stared at each other. 2 people who'd been through hell together now on opposite sides of an impossible decision. And I was caught in the middle, seeing both sides, understanding both arguments, unable to choose. We vote, I said. Democratic decision. Chen, you want to bring it back? Let Kellerman decide what to do with it. Rodriguez, you want to destroy it. Protect humanity from truth it's not ready for. And I paused, trying to figure out what I actually wanted. What did I believe was right? I think we should hide it, I said slowly, the idea forming as I spoke. Not destroy it, not turn it over. We bring it back to Earth, but we don't give it to Kellerman. We hide it, make copies of everything we recorded, scatter those copies in places they'll never find, create a dead man's switch. If anything happens to us, the truth gets released. That way, we have leverage, we have control, and we can decide when and how humanity learns about this. On our terms, not theirs. Rodriguez and Chen both stared at me, like I'd suggested we hijack the spacecraft and fly it into the sun. That's treason, Rodriguez said flatly. That's violating every agreement we signed, breaking every oath we took. They'll hunt us down and kill us. Probably, I agreed. But at least we'd be making our own choice instead of blindly following orders. At least we'd have some control over how this plays out. Chen shook his head violently. No, absolutely not. We have a duty to complete the mission as assigned. We're not politicians or philosophers or priests. We're just the recovery team. We find it, we bring it back, we turn it over. That's the job. Anything else is us playing God, deciding what humanity can and can't know. Who are we to make that choice? Who is Kellerman? I countered. Who are the shadow government types who sent us up here? What gives them the right to decide? At least we've seen what's in that artifact. At least we understand what we're dealing with. They're going to take it, lock it away in some bunker, study it for decades while they figure out how to weaponize it or monetize it or use it for political control. Is that really better than us making the call? The argument went on for hours, going in circles, none of us willing to back down. Chen insisted we had to follow orders, that anything else was wrong. Rodriguez wanted to destroy the artifact to protect humanity. I wanted to hide it, control its release, make sure it was used properly. 3 people, 3 completely different ideas about what right looked like, and no way to reconcile them. Finally, exhausted and frustrated, we agreed to table the discussion until we were closer to Earth. Maybe in the last few hours before re-entry, we'd be able to make a decision. Maybe one of us would convince the others. Or maybe we'd land still arguing, and the decision would be made for us when Kellerman's people took the artifact, and we'd never see it again. That night, or what passed for night in space, I floated near the window and looked out at Earth growing larger ahead of us. Home. The blue marble, the pale blue dot, the only place in the universe where humans had ever lived. And we were bringing back information that would change it forever, for better or worse. I thought about Emma, my sister, going about her life with no idea what was coming. I thought about all the people down there, religious and atheist, believer and skeptic, saint and sinner, all of them about to have their fundamental understanding of reality challenged. Were we doing the right thing, or were we bringing back a poison that would destroy everything humanity had built? I didn't know, and that terrified me more than anything else we'd faced. The final day of the journey passed in tense silence. We ran through re-entry checklists, prepared the spacecraft for atmospheric interface, secured everything that needed securing. The artifact container was strapped down in the center of the capsule, impossible to ignore, a physical presence that seemed to fill the small space despite its relatively modest size. 4 hours before re-entry, Rodriguez pulled me aside, as much as you can pull someone aside in a space capsule, and spoke quietly so Chen couldn't hear. "I'm going to do it," she said. "During re-entry, when we're at peak heating and everything's chaotic, I'm going to open the container and destroy the artifact. Chen will try to stop me, but in his suit, he won't be able to move fast enough. You'll have to choose whose side you're on. Are you going to help me save humanity from this thing, or are you going to help Chen bring it back?" I looked at her, saw the determination in her eyes, the absolute conviction that she was right, and I realized that she was serious. She was actually going to try to destroy proof of God's existence because she believed it was the right thing to do, and she was asking me to help her, or at least not to stop her. "Don't do this," I said. "Rodriguez, if you destroy it, we'll never know for sure what we saw. We'll spend the rest of our lives wondering if it was real, if we actually found proof, or if we all just had some kind of shared hallucination. And humanity will never get the chance to make their own choice about what to believe." "Maybe that's better," she said. "Maybe mystery is better than certainty. Maybe faith needs doubt to survive. Or maybe humanity deserves the truth," I countered. "Even if it's difficult, even if it's dangerous. Maybe we're not as fragile as you think. Maybe we can handle it." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "So you're on Chen's side. You're going to bring it back." "I'm on humanity's side," I said, whatever that means. 2 hours before re-entry, Kellerman's voice crackled over the comms, the first communication we'd had with Earth since leaving lunar orbit. "Shepard 1, this is ground control. We have you on tracking. Trajectory is nominal. Everything's looking good for re-entry and recovery. Congratulations on a successful mission. Do you have the package?" "Affirmative," Rodriguez responded, her voice professionally neutral. "Package is secured and ready for delivery." "Outstanding," Kellerman said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "We're prepared to receive you. Recovery team is standing by at the landing site. Once you're down, we'll have you in debriefing within 2 hours. We're eager to examine what you've brought back." I'll bet you are, I thought. Eager to lock it away, control it, decide what the world gets to know. Eager to have the ultimate power, proof of God, sitting in your classified facility, yours to use or hide as you see fit. That's when I made my decision. Not to help Rodriguez destroy it, not to blindly hand it over to Kellerman, but to do something else entirely, something that would probably get me killed but felt like the only right option left. I was going to steal it. Not permanently. I didn't have the resources or the connections to hide something like this long term, but I'd take it long enough to make copies, to document everything, to create insurance that the truth would get out eventually, even if they killed me for it. It was insane. It was probably suicidal, but it was the only way I could live with myself after this. The re-entry was violent, the spacecraft shaking and shuddering as we hit the atmosphere at 17,000 miles per hour, friction heating the heat shield to temperatures that would melt steel. Through the window, I could see the plasma sheath forming around us, turning our view into a wall of fire. For 4 minutes we were in the fire, out of radio contact, isolated and alone as we plummeted toward Earth. This was when Rodriguez said she'd make her move, but she didn't. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe she'd seen something in my face that convinced her not to. Or maybe she was waiting for a better opportunity. I'd never know, because we survived the re-entry, the parachutes deployed, and we splashed down in the Pacific Ocean exactly on target. Within minutes, helicopters were overhead, and divers were attaching flotation collars to keep us stable until the recovery ship arrived. We'd made it. We'd gone to the moon, found an impossible structure, recovered an artifact God was and brought it back to the mission. Now came the hard part, figuring out what to do with what we'd found, and staying alive long enough to make that final confession. So here I am, sitting in my apartment in the morning, recording because I know they're coming. The black SUV across the street, the clicks on my phone line, the GPS tracker under my car, they're not even trying to hide anymore. I've had a good run, longer than I probably deserved, but it's ending tonight. So let me tell you what happened after we splashed down in the Pacific. Let me tell you about the betrayal, the disappearances, and why I'm the last one left to tell this story. The recovery ship pulled us out of the water within 30 minutes of splashdown. We were still in our suits, still strapped in our seats, when the hatch opened and men in unmarked uniforms started pulling us out. Not NASA, not military that I recognized, just professional operators in black tactical gear with no insignia, no name tags, nothing that would identify who they worked for. They separated us immediately. Chen went in one helicopter, Rodriguez in another, me in a third. I tried to make eye contact with them before we were taken away, tried to communicate something, solidarity, determination, a promise that we'd stick together, but they wouldn't look at me, or couldn't. Maybe they'd already made their own deals with Kellerman's people. Maybe they'd already decided to comply, to hand over the artifact and forget everything we'd seen. Or maybe they were just scared. God knows I was. They took me to a facility that didn't appear on any map. Somewhere in Nevada, I think. Based on the desert, I could see through the helicopter windows before they made me put on a hood. Underground, naturally. Everything connected to this program was buried, hidden, locked away from sunlight and scrutiny. The debriefing lasted 6 days. 12 hours a day, sometimes more, in a windowless room with men who asked the same questions over and over, looking for inconsistencies, for lies, for any indication that I was holding something back. They wanted to know everything about the structure, the artifact, the Guardian. They showed me the footage from Rodriguez's suit cameras, the recordings we'd made of the chamber walls and the symbols. They'd analyzed it all, broken down every frame, and their experts had confirmed what we'd reported. The symbols were ancient Hebrew mixed with advanced mathematics. The records depicted biblical events, and the artifact was unlike anything they'd ever seen. What did you feel when you touched it? They kept asking. What did it show you? What did the visions tell you? I told them the truth, or at least most of it. I described seeing the creation, the flood, the parting of the Red Sea. I explained about the observers, their mission to document divine intervention, their structures scattered throughout the solar system. I told them everything except the one thing that mattered. I told them I believed it. That wasn't in my reports. That wasn't in my testimony. I kept that locked away, hidden, because I knew that belief would make me dangerous to them. They wanted operatives who'd treat the artifact as just another piece of recovered technology, not believers who might think it should be shared with the world. On the 7th day, they brought me to a different room. Kellerman was there, along with 2 other men I didn't recognize. Older, powerful looking. The kind of people who made decisions that affected millions of lives and never lost sleep over it. You did good work, Jake, Kellerman said, almost friendly. Excellent work, really. The artifact is secure, our analysis teams are studying it, and your mission report was thorough and professional. We're very pleased. Where are Chen and Rodriguez? I asked. I want to see them. I want to know they're okay. Kellerman's smile didn't waver. They're fine. They've been debriefed, just like you. And they're being relocated to secure housing while we determine their long-term assignment. You'll be joining them shortly. But first, we need to discuss the artifact and what happens next. One of the other men leaned forward. The artifact contains information that could destabilize global society. Proof of divine existence, documentation of miracles, evidence that challenges every scientific and philosophical framework humanity has developed. If released improperly, it could cause panic, religious wars, the collapse of governments. You understand this, yes? I understood. I understood perfectly. They were going to bury it, lock it away forever, pretend it didn't exist. You're not going to tell anyone, I said flatly. You're going to hide it. We're going to protect it, the man corrected, and protect humanity from information it's not ready to process. Perhaps in 50 years, 100 years, when society has evolved to a point where this knowledge can be integrated safely, we'll reconsider. But not now, not in our lifetime. So we went to the moon for nothing, I said, feeling anger rising in my chest. We risked our lives. We found proof that God exists, proof that everything matters, that there's meaning and purpose, and you're going to hide it in a bunker somewhere and let the world keep thinking we're alone in an empty universe? Kellerman's smile finally faded. We went to the moon to recover a strategic asset, which you did, admirably. What we do with that asset is above your pay grade, Jake. Your job is to accept your relocation, live comfortably on your compensation, and never speak about any of this to anyone. Ever. The alternative is that you become a security liability that needs to be managed. Do I need to explain what that means? I knew what it meant. It meant an accident, a suicide, a disappearance. It meant I'd end up like however many other people who'd known too much and become inconvenient. I understand, I said, keeping my voice neutral. When do I get relocated? Tomorrow, Kellerman said. We've arranged a house for you in Montana, remote location, generous monthly stipend, everything you need. You'll live quietly, you'll check in with your handler once a month, and you'll never contact Rodriguez or Chen or anyone else connected to this program. You get to live, Jake. That's more than most people in your position get offered. They let me go after that, escorted me back to a small apartment in the facility where I was supposed to spend my last night before relocation. But I didn't sleep. I spent that night thinking about the little girl in the pink dress, about all the death and suffering I'd seen, about how desperately I'd wanted proof that it all meant something. And now I had that proof, and they were going to lock it away forever. I couldn't let that happen, so I did something incredibly stupid. I broke out of the facility. It wasn't as hard as you'd think. I was a decorated Marine with force recon training. They were civilian security guards who'd gotten complacent working in a classified facility where everyone was supposed to be compliant. I took out 2 guards, stole their access cards, made it to the motor pool, and drove out in a vehicle that looked official enough that the gate guards didn't question it. By the time they realized I was gone, I was 3 hours away and ditching the vehicle for a civilian car. I bought cash from a used dealer in Reno. I'd made one stop before leaving the facility, the room where they were keeping the artifact, studying it, trying to unlock its secrets. I didn't take it. It was too well guarded, too impossible to move without being caught. But I did something else. I touched it. One more time, skin against crystal, and I downloaded everything I could. Not just visions this time, but data, coordinates, locations of other observer structures throughout the solar system, access codes, information that would let humanity find these places, verify the truth, prove that I wasn't crazy. I don't know how I did it. Maybe the artifact wanted me to have that information. Maybe the observers, wherever they were, had decided that humanity was ready after all. Or maybe I was just desperate and lucky, and the artifact responded to that desperation. Either way, I got what I needed. Then I ran. That was 6 years ago. For the first year, I was constantly moving, never staying in one place more than a few days, living off cash and fake IDs, always looking over my shoulder. I tried to find Chen and Rodriguez, tried to track them down through old contacts and careful inquiries. That's when I learned the truth. Chen had disappeared 3 months after we got back. Officially relocated, they said, but when I dug deeper, I found a death certificate in Nebraska. Farm accident, killed by his own tractor. Except Chen grew up in Los Angeles and wouldn't know a tractor from a combine harvester. They'd killed him, probably because he'd talked, or tried to talk, or they'd decided he was too much of a risk with his religious convictions. Rodriguez lasted longer, almost 2 years. Then she committed suicide in her secured housing. Gunshot to the head, note explaining she couldn't live with the guilt of what we'd done. Except I knew Rodriguez. She was the strongest person I'd ever met, mentally and physically. She'd never kill herself. They'd murdered her too, made it look like suicide, and closed another loose end, which left me, the last survivor of Project Shepherd, the only person alive who'd touched the artifact, who'd been inside that structure, who knew the truth and could prove it. I've spent the last 6 years trying to figure out how to release the information without getting killed immediately. I've made copies, lots of them, hidden in digital dead drops and physical locations scattered around the world. I've encrypted the data, built deadman switches, created systems that will automatically release everything if I disappear, and I've been documenting everything, writing it all down, recording it, making sure that when it finally comes out, people will know the full story. But I'm running out of time. They've found me again. I can feel it. The surveillance has been getting more obvious, more aggressive. They're not just watching anymore. They're preparing to move. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, but soon. They're going to kill me, and they're going to make it look like an accident or a suicide or just another casualty of a broken veteran who couldn't cope with PTSD. So I'm telling you all this now while I still can. I'm putting it out there, recording it, uploading it, because someone needs to know the truth before I'm gone. The artifact exists. It's real. It's being held in a classified facility somewhere, probably under Site R or Wright-Patterson, or one of the deep storage locations in Colorado. Inside that artifact is proof, absolute, undeniable proof, that God exists, that the Bible is literally true, that humanity has been observed and documented by beings who witnessed the creation itself. And our government, along with whoever Kellerman really works for, has decided that you don't get to know. They've decided that humanity isn't ready for the truth, that we can't handle knowing we're not alone, that we need to be protected from certainty about divine existence. Maybe they're right. Maybe knowledge would destroy faith, and without faith, we'd have nothing left. Maybe the Guardian was right to try to stop us, and I was wrong to bring the artifact back. I don't know anymore. What I do know is this. I've studied the Bible more in the last 6 years than I ever did before Afghanistan. I've read every verse, every prophecy, every warning about judgment and redemption, and I've compared it to what I saw in that artifact, what the observers documented, and it's all true. Every word. The creation happened exactly as described. The flood drowned the world. Moses parted the Red Sea. Jesus rose from the dead. All of it, literally true, witnessed and recorded by beings who had no reason to lie, which means the rest of it is true too. The parts about judgment, about the end times, about humanity being held accountable for every choice, every sin, every moment of grace or cruelty. If Genesis is literal, then Revelation is literal. If the creation happened, then the second coming is going to happen. If the observers documented the beginning, they're going to document the end, and that end is coming. I don't know when. The artifact didn't give me dates or timelines, but I know it's coming, and I know that when it does, everyone who ever lived is going to have to answer for how they lived. That terrifies me more than anything else I've faced, more than combat, more than the moon, more than the Guardian, because I've done terrible things. I've killed people. I've stood by while innocents died. I've been angry at God for years, blamed him for the world's suffering, refused to believe because I couldn't accept that a loving God would allow such horror. And now I know he's real, and I know I'm going to have to face him someday and explain why I turned away, why I rejected faith, why I spent years cursing his name. I'm not ready for that conversation. I don't think I'll ever be ready for that conversation, but I've made my peace with it. I've prayed, actually prayed, not just going through motions for the first time since Afghanistan. I've asked for forgiveness for the things I've done, the people I've hurt, the years I wasted in anger and doubt. I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if anything could be enough, but I've tried. That's all any of us can do. Try to be better, to do better, to believe even when it's hard. And that's my message to you, whoever's listening to this. If they come for me tonight, if this is my last chance to speak, here's what I want you to know. God is real. I've seen the proof. I've touched it, experienced it, lived with the knowledge for 6 years. And that should terrify you and comfort you in equal measure. Terrify you because it means you're being judged. Your actions matter. There are consequences that extend beyond death. But comfort you because it means you're not alone. You matter. There's meaning and purpose to everything, even the suffering. The coordinates I mentioned earlier, the locations of other observer structures, I've hidden those in my data dumps. If you're reading this after I'm gone, if you're one of the people who receives my Dead Man Switch release, you'll find them. You can verify what I'm saying. You can go to these places, see the structures, touch the proof yourself. But be warned, knowledge changes you. Once you know the truth, once you've seen absolute proof of divine existence, you can't go back to comfortable uncertainty. You can't pretend you don't know. You'll have to live with that knowledge. Make choices based on it. Face the judgment knowing exactly what's waiting for you. Maybe that's better. Maybe certainty is worth the loss of comfortable doubt. Or maybe the Guardian was right, and faith needs mystery to survive. I honestly don't know. What I know is that I'm glad I went to the moon. Glad I found the structure, touched the artifact, learned the truth. Even knowing what it cost. Chen dead, Rodriguez dead, me about to join them, I'd do it again. Because for 6 years, I've lived with purpose. I've known that everything matters, that my life means something, that I'm part of a story bigger than myself. That's worth dying for. So if you're listening to this, if I'm already gone and this recording is all that's left, believe me, don't make the same mistakes I did. Don't waste years in anger and doubt when the truth is out there waiting to be found. Don't wait until it's too late to ask for forgiveness, to try to be better, to live like your choices matter. Because they do. I've seen the proof. God is watching. The observers are documenting. And someday, maybe soon, we're all going to have to answer for how we lived. Make sure your answer is one you can live with, or die with. Wait, I hear something. Footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. Multiple people moving quietly, professionally. They're here. This is it. This is the end. To whoever finds this, I've uploaded everything to the servers I mentioned. The coordinates, the data, the proof. It's all there. Encrypted with keys I've scattered in different locations. Find them. Verify the truth. Tell the world what we found on the moon. Tell them that God is real, that they're not alone, that everything matters. Tell them Jake Millison died trying to give them the truth, and he only wishes he'd lived his life better, knowing what he knew. Tell Emma I love her. Tell her I'm sorry I disappeared, but it was to protect her from this. Tell her to look at the night sky and remember that her brother walked on the moon and found proof of heaven. Tell her to live well, to believe, to have faith, even when it's hard. Tell her I'll see her again, someday, somewhere beyond all this. They're at the door now, trying the lock. I've got maybe 30 seconds. I'm not going to fight. I'm tired of fighting. I'm ready for whatever comes next. Ready to face the judgment, the reckoning, the truth. Ready to meet the God I've been running from for so long and finally get some answers. If you're listening to this, if you made it this far, thank you. Thank you for hearing my story. Thank you for believing, or at least considering the possibility. And thank you for carrying this forward, for seeking the truth, for not letting them bury what we found. The door's opening. Men in tactical gear, weapons drawn. They look surprised that I'm not running, not hiding, just sitting here recording. One of them is saying something, but I can't hear it over the blood pounding in my ears. They're advancing now. Guns up, professional, quick. This is how it ends. Not on the moon, not in space, but here in my apartment, killed by my own government for trying to tell the truth. There are worse ways to die. At least I know what's waiting on the other side. At least I know it meant something. God is real. The Bible is true. The observers are watching. And if you're hearing this, I'm already dead. Find the truth. Tell the world. Don't let my death be meaningless. Don't let Chen and Rodriguez die for nothing. Please, please remember that